Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1801, Unable to Escape. As the power poured out of him, the golden light in Zen's eyes also flickered. A magnificent, sharp, sword intent was condensed on the surface of the great weighty sword. Ripping consciousness, God's intimidating strike, slash. Swish, the blazing sword intent almost cut off all of Zen's emotions and any thought within his mind. It hovered around and formed a sharp radiance. Zen was all alone so he could freely activate the emotion-closing godly way. However, he did not release his sword intent. His only purpose was to cut these stalagmites. Despite being faded, the stalagmites were extremely tough. However, under Zen's physical prowess and the might of the emotion-closing godly way, they were as crisp as paper. Bang, 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 there was a loud explosion as the stalagmites all broke down. Whoosh, without the stalagmites restricting him, Zen jumped up and headed straight towards the black mud, turning into a sharp sword as he did so. Phew, the young man couldn't really figure out just what kind of strange life form this mud was, but it was obvious that it created this cave as a trap. The mud continued squirming on the wall. The liquid it secreted strongly attracted the giant black shadows inside the walls as the more it let out, the faster the shadows moved. This mud probably thought Zen would never be able to get out of its cage, so it maintained an extremely slow speed. However, after that loud explosion, the young man managed to free himself and attack. Seeing Zen rushing in at an extremely terrifying speed, the mud suddenly grew out 5 tentacles and reached into the gang layer. Both the mud and the entire cave became one instantaneously. Transparent stalagmites began to spread from the mud, determined to cage Zen once again. However, the young man's current speed and strength were far beyond the mud's expectations. It hadn't taken Zen that seriously. After all, it had already consumed quite a number of true gods, so what could a proving godly warrior do? It was the mud's mistake to judge Zen so wrongly, however, it was too late. The stalagmites were not enough to obstruct Zen at all. As the young man entered the state of ripping consciousness, he not only could make full use of the power of his emotion-closing godly way but also stay calm despite the onslaught of threats that came at him. Bang bang bang, Zen swung the great weighty sword crazily, slashing away at any stalagmite that dared approach him. In just a few seconds, Zen had already slashed around 100 stalagmites and was quickly heading towards that mud. Sizz, the mud let out a strange sound. As a last resort, the mud tore itself into pieces and hid into the wall behind it. Zen's eyebrow twitched. It really can enter the gang layer. He clearly saw the mud split itself into 6 pieces, but the other 5 were just its tentacles. The one in the middle was the largest and had a bulge on the surface. Without any hesitation, Zen slashed the great weighty sword towards that prominent bulge. Boom! To his surprise, the bulge was extremely tough. He couldn't break it even with the power of his great weighty sword. Having escaped his blade, the bulge jumped out of the mud and scaled the walls of the cave, trying to get away from Zen. Upon closer inspection, the bulge was actually a clean, transparent bead. In the middle of the bead was a slowly rotating pupil. It seemed to be the eyeball of some strange creature. The law of evolution made it so that the eyeball was the weakest spot of most creatures. This law didn't seem to apply to this creature since the eyeball was so tough. Although he was a bit surprised at this sudden turn of events, Zen did not stop. The 6 pieces of mud left behind were now motionless and Zen thought it best to put all pieces into his space ring. He also stretched out his left hand to grasp the eyeball. Zen's initial goal was to obtain that strange mud, but the strange eyeball changed his priorities. Somehow, he felt that this thing had something to do with the primal chaos technique, which would explain his inner world's strong reaction towards it. However, just as he was about to grab it, a skinny, long arm suddenly popped out of the wall and made a grab for him. The shadows seemed to have finally penetrated through the wall. This hand, it wasn't organic. Rather, the hand seemed to be carved from some sort of special jade. Zen couldn't feel any blood or energy from this arm, so it was most probably a puppet. There was no way Zen was going to let the eyeball escape. He clenched his teeth and hacked away the arm reaching for him. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions. Zen had now entered the state of forgetting himself and unleashed 70% of the god's intimidating strike. At that moment, even an ordinary true god would fear his blade, however, the jade arm remained intact and unharmed. Seeing this, Zen's heart sank and his body suddenly floated. He gritted his teeth and increased his speed up by 30%, which was almost his limit. Fortunately, the effort paid off as he finally caught the elusive eyeball in his hand. "Zen, watch out, there are hands around you," Master Evil shouted in warning. Countless arms, stretching around 10 feet long, all burst out from the walls and clawed in the air aimlessly. There were about 6 or 7 arms reaching out towards Zen from the wall that faced Zen. Knowing just how strong these arms were, Zen figured that he would surely die if he got caught. Even if he exhausted his power and activated his entire strength source, it would still be difficult for him to break free. 8 smoky melodies. At such a critical moment, Zen thought it best to use his bodily movement skill. These arms could only grab at the air blindly and didn't really know exactly where Zen was. After employing the 8 smoky melodies, Zen's body became light as paper and avoided all the arms reaching for him. Zen finally breathed a sigh of relief as he managed to escape the clutches of those arms. He deactivated the 8 smoky melodies and gasped for breath, his chest heaving as he did so. The sight of those densely packed arms made Zen's scalp tingle. The longer he stayed there, the more danger he was bound to face. He had to find an exit as soon as possible. He went into the cave from the top, but the tunnel he had created suddenly disappeared. He couldn't figure out the reason as to why this happened, and he didn't have the time to think about it either. All he could do was to slash at the top of the cave with his sword in hopes of finding an exit. As the sword swung forward, a long, thin sword radiance directly tore open a huge crack on top of him. Zen was about to rush out of the crack, but the sight of what awaited him inside made him weak in the knees. On the other side of the crack was another huge cave, and inside this cave were countless tiny pieces of mud which kept jumping around. Each mud had a bulge at the center where a pupil resided. These pupils currently stared at Zen. If this cave contained only the mud Zen needed, he would have been happy. Collecting those pieces of mud would help him condense his godly tile much faster. Unfortunately, along with these pieces of mud were 7 or 8 huge heads. These heads looked like skinless monsters that stared at Zen menacingly. He felt his chest constrict as these eyes stared at him. At that moment, Zen truly felt that he had been pushed into a dead end. He felt genuine fear that he would be unable to leave this strange cave forever. Chapter 1802, The Pond. At this point, Zen was suspecting that he had fallen into some kind of illusion. He remembered coming down from the top of the cave, but why were there so many monsters up there in the other cave? It was impossible for a huge cave to have formed in the gang layer above him in such a short time. He couldn't figure out what had really happened. "Zen, watch out, down there," Master Evil was shouting at him in his mind. He had also sensed Zen's fall into depression and the reason behind it. Whoever encountered such a situation would wonder if he had lost his mind. Master Evil was just as shocked, but he only had a soul fragment left and wasn't as nervous as Zen. The scene before him was absolutely absurd, but he hoped that Zen would find a way out. Since the cave appeared above Zen's head out of nowhere, Master Evil thought Zen could switch directions and find another way out, so he asked Zen to create a path from below. Zen's eyes narrowed as he focused on keeping his composure. He was quick to pull himself together, thanks to his change in mentality. Back in the evolutionary universe, Zen had moved along the path of martial arts rather smoothly as he aimed to grow stronger. His confidence was like the sun that had just risen in the morning. With his passion for martial arts alone, he seemed capable of defeating anything in his path. Now, Zen had grown more cautious and sensitive to his environment. The Divine Land was a different territory, so he merely had to adjust his mindset to face it. After Master Evil's warning, a strong instinct for survival rose in Zen's heart. Even if the way he previously entered was gone, he had to do anything he could to find another way out. Anything was better than being trapped there. The arms around the cave were getting closer to him, and the dark shadows could emerge from the walls at any minute. Simultaneously, the huge heads above his head also came down from the crack. Ripping consciousness. In this situation, any negative emotion could put Zen to death. Once again, he suppressed his emotions with his swordsmanship comprehension while at the same time employing the emotion-closing godly way. With a flip of his right hand, he thrust the sword downwards abruptly and backed up. The sword intent from the great weighty sword cut a hole right into the ground, and the coal-black gang on the cave's surface turned dark green. Looking into the hole, he was surprised to see black pieces of gang at the other end, but these ones were not as hard or tough as the green ones in the cave he was in. Finally, things are back to normal. Zen was overjoyed. When he was immersed in the emotion-closing godly way, there had to be no trace of any emotion fluctuations in his mind, but he had yet to cultivate this godly way to perfection. When he saw the black gang, he felt he had found a way out and his soul, which should have been emotionless, grew a tad excited. Boom, boom, boom. Now, Zen went all out. With his powerful physical strength, he launched the god's intimidating strike which could pierce a passageway over 100 feet long. With only 3 to 4 strikes, he had created a path about 5 to 600 feet deep downward. Then, Zen let himself fall straight down the hole like a long wooden stick. As he fell, he heard a burst of thick footsteps. The giant black shadows wandering in the walls finally emerged, but he didn't have the time to take a look and figure out what the giant shadows were before falling into the passageway. When he raised his head again, dozens of arms stretching out came into view as they filled the passageway. After a quick glimpse, he lowered back his head and continued digging downwards. After making it about 4,000 or 5,000 feet down, he raised his head and saw that the other end of the hole above him had become a blurry speck. With his magic eyesight, he could see the arms still tightly stuck at the entrance. Only then did Zen sigh in relief. It seemed that the creatures couldn't leave the cave, so Zen halted the ripping consciousness. Though he didn't know what happened around the cave, he figured that he had dug directly down the big crater of the Tai clan. And after going through the cave, he had dug several thousand feet deeper down. It was no longer realistic for him to keep going down as there seemed to be many strange creatures and happenings in the underground divine land. Who knew what else he might have dug out? After discussing the matter with Master Evil in his head for a moment, Zen decided to start digging forward. Though the cave above him was by no means small, he could avoid it if he kept digging horizontally. With his great weighty sword, he managed to create a 10,000-foot-long passageway. At this point, Zen changed direction once again and began digging upwards. To build such a long passage in the gang layer was too much labor for even a mid-rank true god. But Zen had unparalleled strength. If it were some ordinary low-rank true god caught in such a situation, they might not manage to break through the thick layer of gang. Carefully, Zen continued digging upward, afraid of finding his way into the previous cave again. Along the way, he and Master Evil analyzed the situation he had encountered a while ago. They arrived at the conclusion that the weird cave had been displaced, but they couldn't figure out how it moved in the layer of gang. Luckily, he was able to make it out of there safely. And more importantly, he got 6 pieces of mud. 5 of them were about the same size as what the Tai clan had sold to him and the middlemost piece was 4 or 5 times larger than the others. In addition, he had also caught an eyeball, though he could only find time to examine it further after making it back. Keeping his vigilance, he continued to dig diagonally upward. He wasn't going too fast. After about 8 hours of digging, he suddenly felt the obstruction before his sword weaken. The sound of gravel rubbing came from behind the wall. I am leaving the gang layer. Zen's eyes lit up. Ordinary soil lay before him now, meaning he had finally bypassed the cave. After about 5 minutes of digging through soil, he felt wetness nearing the surface. The moment he got through the soil layer, turbulent water flowed down from above. He had dug himself out and into a pond. It was within a small courtyard of the Tai clan. Within the 6-burden divine city, the Tai clan was rather insignificant, but since it had been running a business there for so many years, it was still considered somewhat superior to the ordinary clans. Its entire house occupied a large area of land, built in a unique fashion. Several maid-servants in the courtyard saw a sudden whirl in the middle of the pond, piquing their curiosity. The water sank so quickly down Zen's passage. Soon after, Zen appeared in the middle of the pond, drenched. The sight earned screams of shock from the Tai clan maids. After the commotion, Zen was led back to the main hall. Devon's uncles were utterly puzzled and were eager to know what exactly happened. Not only did they fail to find Zen, they had no idea how he left. The huge crater was still rather far from the clan. A few hours after Zen disappeared, he appeared in their pond, much to their surprise. It was all too strange. But Zen didn't tell them the truth. If he had only dug out a few pieces of mud underground, it wouldn't have been necessary for him to lie, but when he found the weird cave and saw the man and woman on the stone, he knew that it was no simple matter. He figured it would be wiser to avoid revealing anything. He told the clan that he found something strange as he dug along the way, but couldn't find a way back and dug randomly into the ground. After a few hours, he just managed to find a way out and accidentally found himself in the clan's pond. The elders didn't respond well to Zen's story. They weren't convinced in the least. After Zen left, they already made up their minds to send people down the passageway Zen created and explore it. Zen, of course, was well aware of this plan, but it was hard to say whether or not they were able to find the strange cave. Based on what happened, Zen was certain that the cave could move. Perhaps that was why no one had discovered the cave for so long. Chapter 1803, A Girl's Head. After spending a day in the Tai clan's house, Zen finally left. Of course, they didn't ask him to stay, they were anxious to explore the passage below the pond themselves. When he returned to the Heavenly Han house, Zen chose to cultivate in seclusion. By now, he had already figured out the usage of the mud. Although the will of his inner world continued to urge him to devour the mud as soon as he could, he continued to ignore it. Apart from the mud, this time, he had also obtained the transparent bead. At that time, after Zen had taken away the bead, the magical mud lost its energy, leaving it as nothing more than ordinary mud. So when Alfred caught the first piece of mud, the black thing had actually abandoned a part of its body, the real core should have been this bead. Gently, Zen flipped the space ring and took the bead out with his right hand. Too busy escaping from danger, he hadn't been able to observe it carefully. When he did, he found the bead's surface full of cracks. While the bead was indeed strong, it couldn't bear the full power of Zen's sword strike. This is a soul container, there must be the soul of some living being within. In Zen's mind, Master Evil looked at the bead and analyzed it for him. Generally speaking, only the best puppet technique could seal one's soul into a bead. It is said that some holy beings actually like doing it. To seal one's soul into a bead. The thought made Zen's eyes flicker. Saul was a puppet in the fairy palace, and his soul had lived for countless years. Zen had never seen Saul's soul container, nor did he know if Bromley had sealed Saul's soul into a bead too. While Zen examined it, the pupil in it suddenly turned. Rolling gently on his finger, the bead wanted to escape his grasp. Though it was unexpected, he managed to react quickly. With a smile on his face, he turned over his palm and grabbed it once again. There is indeed a soul inside it. It still wants to escape. When he grasped the bead again, the pupil disappeared and the bead stopped moving. Ha ha, the soul in it has been pretending to be dead, Master Evil remarked with an amused smile. To find out the secret of the cave, Zen had to start with the bead. He held the bead tightly until an invisible spiritual sense spread from his mind. It extended slowly along the center of his eyebrows before pouring right into the bead. Just as he did so, a clear image was projected into his mind, making his eyes widen. What in the world? The scene was in the likeness of torture. Blood-red crows circled in the air, and some slender black figures held curved sickles and walked aimlessly in the underground cave. In the middle of these shadows was a huge pot standing thousands of feet high. With the continuous burning of the red flames, the pot boiled with something bobbing up and down in the center. It was a small head. The hair on this head seemed to be thousands of feet long, covering the pot and floating within the boiling water. Soon after, the hair was slowly drawn like a curtain, revealing a delicate and elegant face. It was the face of a young girl. Zen's soul began trembling when he saw the girl's appearance. "What's wrong with you?" asked Master Evil nervously in Zen's mind. Zen's soul was shaking to such an extent. What could he have found? "Yan, is that you?" The girl looked nearly identical to Yan. "No, this is not her." Although they looked exactly the same, their auras were totally different. As Zen watched, the girl in the pot suddenly opened her eyes. When her light purple eyelids shot up, a pair of blood-red pupils appeared, releasing endless demonic power, causing an indescribable strange feeling. The pair of red pupils stared at Zen as the girl's thin lips curled into a faint smile. That smile meant something more. Then she moved her lips until they formed a word. Zen's heart skipped a beat as he attentively stared at the young girl's head. He wanted so badly to know what she was going to say. But just at that moment, the pupil in the transparent bead in Zen's hand suddenly began spinning until it flashed a small flame. With a dull sound, the originally clear pupil immediately turned muddled until the soul in the soul container exploded. At the same time, the picture in Zen's mind collapsed into countless fragments and disappeared without a trace. With that, Zen sat there, motionless, like the living dead. After a long moment of silence, Master Evil asked, "What did you see? Why are you so shocked?" In Master Evil's eyes, Zen was well qualified to be Bromley's disciple, so he must have witnessed quite a lot of things. Still, he couldn't imagine what could have made Zen lose his wits. Meanwhile, somewhere in the divine land, the young girl's head floated up slowly from the pot. Her long, thin hair kept stretching out as her head floated, and like an overturned black waterfall, it slowly pulled out from the pot. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Nearby, a group of black figures crawled forward. These objects were the pieces of mud Zen was trying hard to find. The pieces tangled into each other until they formed a full shape, forming a woman's body. Its color changed as well, forming a layer of snow-white skin. In the end, the mud transformed into a perfect headless woman. The girl's head slowly floated to the body and fused with it. Her 1,000-foot-long hair was dragged along the ground like woven black silk, and her demonic eyes looked sad as she said in an ethereal voice, "Why not let me finish my words?" Zen was still blankly staring at the wall, grasping the bead tightly in his hand. In theory, he didn't actually have to worry about Yan's safety. Win had once told him that Yan was under Harold's protection, and as the chief disciple of Zen's father, Harold was also a powerful warrior in the divine land, only a tad lower than the holy beings. So Harold would have never allowed Yan to fall into such a situation. But how come the girl in the pot looked exactly like Yan? The pot's image echoed and lingered in Zen's mind. While he tried his hardest to deny the thoughts, he couldn't escape the worries in his heart. What if it really was Yan? She is absolutely not Yan. A sharp gaze flashed through Zen's eyes before he quickly dismissed the idea. Once the thought manifested, it grew madly, shaking Zen's entire state of mind. If he let the idea develop, it would have eventually evolved into his inner demon. It definitely wasn't worth it. The woman seemed to have been trying to say something at the last minute. But after a slight movement of her lips, the soul in the transparent bead exploded and Zen lost his chance to understand what went on after that. Reading her lips, he could only see that she started by saying, but what was she trying to tell him? For a long time, Zen stood frozen until he finally decided to let the matter go and put the transparent bead back into his space ring. No matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't get an answer. If he was strong enough in the future, he could probably explore the strange cave again, but now was surely not the time to pour his energy into it. After dealing with the bead, Zen took the mud out from his space ring. A single piece of mud could only be condensed into a single piece of godly tile crystal. Though Zen didn't know how many pieces of mud were needed to condense a complete tile, he had no choice but to use the only method he knew of at the moment. When he brought the mud out, his inner world began stirring again. Chapter 1804, Dispute. Zen had a longing to throw the piece of mud into his inner world. He was curious to find out as to what might happen to it. He let go of the mud, his nerves tingling with excitement. Zen watched with anticipation as the thick, gooey mud fell into the chaotic sea. Vast bust bubbles appeared and a strange brown mist engulfed everything upon the moment of impact. Zen grinned broadly. He noticed that even though the color of this mud was a tad bit different, it had the same effect as the one given by Lin. He assumed that the Tai clan's mud was preserved for far too long, thus it turned brown rather than black. Thus, he grabbed hold of the other 5 pieces of the mud and threw them in the water. Much to his astonishment, the water appeared as if a submarine was emerging from it. It looked as if someone had put the sea on a burner. His excitement lay no bounds. Zen couldn't quite believe what was happening in his inner world. He was further stunned when a dark brown cloud rose from his inner world and moved towards his godly plate. At this point, Zen's comprehension of the emotion-closing godly way was infused into the cloud, paving way for dark sword-like figures which rose from the cloud and started to glow, converging into sword clouds. The sky was filled with the whooshing sound of the sword clouds. The sword clouds made their way towards Zen's godly plate. They tried to penetrate Zen's godly plate, unsuccessful at first, but after a while, they turned solid, into a triangle crystal and attached themselves to the center of Zen's plate. Zen noticed the difference in the size of both the crystals. He was astonished by how gigantic this crystal was. Thus, he came to the conclusion that the larger the pile of mud thrown into the inner world was, the larger the size of cloud would be, thus paving way for a bigger crystal to be formed. All Zen ever wanted was to condense a godly tile in his inner world. He knew that the time was ripe and he had to condense his own godly tile. Although, he had some doubts about it. A few days ago, when Zen was running away from that weird cave as quickly as possible, he found another cave adjacent to his. What he saw next turned his blood cold. Although he couldn't quite figure out what they exactly were, he knew he had to get away from those hideous black creatures. With Zen's current level of strength, it wouldn't be a wise choice for him to return to that cave as his life was quite dear to him. He had to wait until his cultivation reached a higher level before going back. While staying at the Heavenly Han house, he obediently followed every command and listened to every single word the true gods had said about the godly ways. Although the true gods were blessed with knowledge, they were not very good fighters. Their sole purpose was to explore the godly ways. They had a firm grasp on the godly ways and knew them inside out. They even went to the extent that if a student was having some troubles in understanding the godly ways, they would explain them to him in plain simple words. Zen knew he had to learn the godly ways. By the help of the Infinity Ruler, he was able to gain the recognition of a great deal of godly ways. He was also able to absorb the internal momentum of the godly way tablets. The Infinity Ruler enabled him to release some of the power from those godly ways, although he quite didn't master the knowledge of the godly ways completely. Learning about godly ways from the true gods helped Zen greatly. He estimated that he would have been able to learn much more about the godly ways and would have acquired knowledge about the divine land, had he stayed at the Heavenly Han House for just 1 year. But this became impossible, much to his surprise. His stay at the Heavenly Han House lasted for a month. A month later, the members of the Han clan came over. The arrival of the members of the Han clan was a cheerful moment for everyone. News spread like wildfire through the whole six-burdened divine city each time a member of the Han clan visited. The Heavenly Han House had some disciples from the second-tier and third-tier clans. These clans had high expectations from their young members, hoping that one day they would be able to fulfill their destiny by joining the Han clan and by entering the floating island. However, entering the Heavenly Han House was a daunting task, and it was even more difficult to enter the floating island. It was no secret that countless true gods wanted to get into the floating islands of the Han clan and other rich clans. Mid-rank true gods, like Master Evil, also demonstrated their desire to get into the floating islands. But only the Han clan and few other clans truly deserved their place on the floating islands. Thus, every year, the Han clan recruited strong warriors from the Heavenly Han House and sent them to the floating island. This time, Zen had the privilege to get recruited by the Han clan and sent to the floating island. The news of Zen being recruited made countless warriors resent him. These warriors dedicated their entire lives to the purpose of getting recruited by the Han clan, thus having an opportunity to enter the floating island. But Zen being recruited solely on the basis of his past performances made them quite jealous of him. There were some warriors who were so resentful of Zen that they cursed him. They made fun of him and the Han clan. They proclaimed that the mistake of recruiting Zen might prove quite costly to them. In the main hall of the Heavenly Han House sat an old man who had a distinctive white mustache. He was wearing a cloak made of gold and looked impatient. Adam did not live up to his name, the old man fumed. He was a complete and utter failure at the floating island. We can't let that happen again. He addressed the members of the Han clan gathered in front of him. His booming voice could be heard all over the place. The clan members sat there uneasily, their faces white with fear. When the old man mentioned Adam, the clan members flinched and wore a serious face. Among them sat a man named Bentley. He appeared quite enraged when Adam was mentioned, although he was quite good at disguising it quickly. Adam was the youngest son of Bentley, the leader of the sub-branches of the Han clan. He was quite diligent and his talent knew no bounds. He didn't let the posh lifestyle of his fellow clan members get to him and continued to work hard. Even in the Han clan, he was not inferior to any outstanding warrior. Although the Han clan didn't recruit warriors then, his father urged the clan members to send Adam directly to the floating island, assuring that he was prepared for the task as he became a proving godly warrior. However, Adam's stay in the floating island didn't last long as he was sent back 3 years later. Much to everyone's dismay, he had gone mad. It was rumored that Adam experienced great torture at the hands of other disciples. He was quite often bullied as well. Now Adam lived in his own family. It wasn't hard for the clan to raise a lunatic. Bentley felt partially responsible for Adam's current state. He knew he would never be able to forgive himself. When the old man mentioned Adam, Bentley resisted the urge to scream at the old man. Adam is still one of us, Bentley said in a calm yet affirming tone. The other leaders knew how important Adam was to Bentley. And even though they didn't get along well with Bentley, they knew that mentioning Adam was completely immoral and unnecessary. The old man laughed sadistically. I hope the sub-branches would recommend someone sensible this time, not a lunatic like Adam, the old man said without any remorse. This infuriated Bentley. He couldn't hide the outrageous expression on his face anymore. He stood up, facing the old man, his eyes flaming with anger. Other leaders had to calm him down as he still mumbled angrily under his breath. The old man held an important position in the floating island. But so did Bentley, who was the leader of the Han clan's sub-branches. Although Bentley's position was not inferior to that of the old man, he could always be overruled by the old man due to his status and his connections in the Han clan. All the warriors that were inducted in the floating island were examined by the old man. Due to his position and vast experience, he was respected by all the members of the Han clan. Bentley tried his best to please the old man, but every time the old man visited, he would bring up the unfortunate incident Bentley's son had, which enraged Bentley. Bentley vowed that he wouldn't leave the old man unscathed the next time he mentioned Adam. Had it not been for the leaders, Bentley would have struck down the old man for good. Although the old man realized his arrogance, he felt humiliated by Bentley's actions and did not take them kindly. Adam's talents were average. He was always proud and arrogant. When he realized he couldn't compete with the rest, he went mad, and the whole bullying story is being used as a scapegoat. How could you be so blind, Bentley? Just admit that he failed, he roared. Bentley was taken aback. He pointed out the fact that the old man himself tested Adam before he was admitted to the floating island. Bentley wanted to punch the old man, Yazid. But he knew that doing so would get him trouble and it might end up in him being banished from the clan. Yazid knew that Bentley couldn't harm him, even if he wanted to. I will definitely test the warrior you recommend this time more carefully, he answered, while smiling maliciously. Chapter 1805. Making things difficult for Zen. Upon hearing Yazid's words, all the members of the Han clan's sub-branches, including the leader of the heavenly Han house, Malloy, looked forlorn. The sub-branches of the Han clan possessed a special recommendation right, and they attached great importance to this right. They seldom used it, but once they used, they only recommended capable and competent people. Although Yazid was shouldered with the responsibility of evaluating all the candidates, his duty was just a formality. Usually, he didn't do it too seriously. After all, the sub-branches of the Han clan wouldn't recommend any random person casually. Else, the real strength of the one that was recommended would be disclosed once they came to the floating island. In fact, Adam, the youngest son of Bentley, could definitely not be considered as a loser. He had suffered something undisclosed after he went to the floating island of the Han clan. That was how he got into such a situation. If Yazid was really going to take the test seriously, then it would obviously be difficult for Thad. The people from the heavenly Han house were naturally nervous. Looking at the nervous expressions on the faces of the people from the sub-branches of the Han clan, Yazid was complacent. In his eyes, none of these people was able to question him. He continued to raise his voice and sneered, "Why hasn't the boy arrived yet? If I have to wait any longer, I shall leave at once." "Hold on, he has arrived." The guard from the heavenly Han house came from outside the main hall, to announce their arrival. Then Zen followed, led by 2 guards and stepped into the main hall. Zen was a little thrilled, knowing that his plan was going on smoothly. After all, entering the floating island was the crucial part. But as soon as he stepped inside the hall, he sensed something amiss. The headmen of the sub-branches of the Han clan, including Bentley and Malloy, looked gloomy. In fact, Bentley to some extent even looked angry. As a top-ranked true god, the leader of the sub-branches of the Han clan could not be ignored in the entire divine land. What happened that made him so angry? Glancing at Zen indifferently, Yazid said in a voice dripping with sarcasm, "I thought you were going to recommend someone incredibly talented. But it turns out you bring another waste to the floating island." Hearing this, Zen frowned slightly, and an imperceptible cold light flashed through his eyes. Yazid sat on the top of the main hall with a dignified and arrogant expression. Zen could tell at a glance that this person was probably the key person to bring him to the floating island. But he didn't expect the old man to call him a waste. That was highly insulting of him. Though the people of the sub-branches of the Han clan didn't speak on his behalf, Zen didn't lose his temper. Instead, the flame of excitement in his heart instantly went out, and his face looked cold. Ahem, Malloy cleared his throat in his attempt to break the tension hovering in the air. Although there was some sort of strain between Yazid and Bentley, they had to place the current situation as priority. This Thad Luo was recognized by hundreds of godly way tablets in the test of the heavenly Han house. He is really someone to be reckoned with, so we recommend him to you. And he is definitely no waste. Yazid looked surprised after hearing Malloy speak with such affirmation. He snorted and said, "Being acknowledged by hundreds of godly way tablets is just because of his potential. Moreover, you should chew no more than you can swallow. A truly promising genius can achieve great success only by cultivating one godly way." Yazid said those words only to belittle Thad. In fact, many true gods cultivated not just one kind of godly way. Sometimes it would act more effectively when one godly way was infused with several other ones. But nevertheless, his words also made some sense. Being admitted by hundreds of godly way tablets was in itself a shocking feat. Zen had even grasped the internal momentum of those godly ways through the infinity ruler. However, despite all this, Zen's strength did not improve much. Faced against a mighty enemy, Zen still had to rely on his emotion-closing godly way. Malloy didn't want to argue with Yazid either. He knew that Zen's strong points were not just being recognized by the godly way tablets. Although this mysterious lad didn't show much competence, his real strength was hidden like an iceberg. Till date, everyone was aware of just the tip of his skills. His actual and true potentials were still unknown to many. Whether or not Thad has the ability to enter the floating island, please feel free to test him, Malloy said as he smiled faintly. He seemed very confident. Yazid was even more agitated seeing Malloy's arrogant reaction. He felt compelled to bring trouble to the Han clan's sub-branches. As for Zen, he felt a little depressed at the sight of this intense aura. No matter what kind of conflict there was between the sub-branches of Han clan and this top-ranked true god, it seemed he would definitely have to bear the consequences. Alright then, let's see what this fellow is capable of. Yazid smirked and took a deep breath. A great power burst out, echoing throughout the main hall. The power contained the internal momentum of the 5 elements godly way, which meant he activated the same. The faces of the masters of the sub-branches darkened with resentment. Yazid was a top-ranked true god, but should he activate his own godly way to test a proving godly warrior? When Bentley had tested Zen last time, he had only used his brute strength to spar with Zen. But unexpectedly, he was defeated by Zen. Nevertheless, Bentley didn't show a slightest trace of anger. A dignified top-ranked true god always had a temperament. On the other hand, Yazid used godly way at the very beginning. Was he really going to stoop so low by killing Zen? Everyone shared the same thoughts, but no one dared to say it in words. They were well aware that it would only add more fuel to the flames. Hence they chose to remain silent and watch the scene in front of them. What does he intend to do? He is a top-ranked true god. How could he suppress you by the 5 elements godly way? Zen, run! Even Master Evil was stunned. He practiced the heinously evil way and had a very black heart with 0 emotions and feelings. Despite his nature, he was shocked to see the old man react in such a shameless way. Who knows why the true god is carrying such resentment towards me? Zen was filled with depression. He was extremely unhappy, but in the end, he still had to deal with the old man. After all, it was an opportunity to enter the floating island, and Zen was not willing to neglect it. Perhaps the old man had some other intentions. Son, I have cultivated the 5 elements godly way for 12 divine eras and formed my own understanding. I can transform the internal momentum into the 5 elements destructing. If you can resist for even 5 minutes, you will have passed the test. Yazid smiled coldly. He did not have any personal vendetta against Zen at all, but he had a nasty intention to suppress the arrogance of the sub-branches of the Han clan. Hence he had no option but to be hard on Zen. As soon as he spoke, the internal momentum inside the main hall began to compress. It soon transformed into the law power of metal, wood, water, fire and earth around Zen. The 5 elements destructing was a theurgy that was comprehended by Yazid in the 5 elements godly way. The power of the 5 elements was so strong that it was enough to create a world of its own, but it was still an incomplete world created by the theurgy of the 5 elements. However, Yazid tried his best to make up an incomplete but incredible destructing world, that was considered to be novel in this godly way. As soon as the internal momentum kept on evolving, it transformed into a brilliantly shining world. It was only about 10 square meters, big enough to cover Zen completely. Splash! At this moment, Zen seemed to have entered the illusion. Everything around him had disappeared, as he stepped into a world made by the power of the 5 elements. The ground beneath his feet, the golden light in the sky, the tree at a distance, the tsunami that came overwhelmingly from afar, and the fire clouds made up a wonderful world. However, the world was rapidly collapsing and destructing. In the destructive mode, the powers of the 5 elements collided with each other and at the same time attacked Zen. Zen's eyes shot up sharply. The top-ranked true god's attack was quite extraordinary. The powers of the 5 elements intertwined and released an extremely complicated power. That kind of energy was completely different from the energy contained in the magnetic sacred mountain. The magnetic sacred mountain became extremely complex after condensing 5 types of laws, hence it proved to be very stable. However, Yazid could make those law powers crash each other and cause destruction. An extremely unstable destructing energy burst out. Since it was not stable, the power would be multiplied. In the blink of an eye, Zen was surrounded by the destructing energy. Streaks of sharp golden light cut through Zen's body, while the flames burned Zen with vigorous intensity. Zen could endure the attack of these law powers, but when the destructing energy burst out, he felt a great sense of threat. Bang, 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 the destructing energy easily penetrated through the redemption armor and worked on Zen's body. Even if Zen's body was strong enough to endure the attack, he still got hurt by the energy and got a wound. Seeing the spectacle, Yazid sneered and said, "If you can't withstand it, then don't push yourself too hard. If you can't go to the floating island, you will still have a chance in the future. It will be a pity if you're killed though." Both Malloy and Bentley glared at Yazid coldly. The people of the sub-branches of the Han clan were completely disappointed with Yazid, since despite being a top-ranked true god, he attacked a proving godly warrior with his powerful Thurgi. Chapter 1806. Absorbing the internal momentum. Yazid hadn't used his full strength. Being a top-ranked true god, half of the six-burden divine city would be destroyed if he used all his strength. Even so, it was unfair to Zen. The 5 elements destructing Thurgi, which was used by Yazid, was not suitable for the test of a proving godly warrior. Unable to stand it anymore, Malloy shouted at them. "The test is too much for you to handle, Thad. You need to give up. The floating island will send people to recruit young geniuses next year. I am sure that you will be able to enter the floating island by that time." The geniuses that had been recommended particularly by the sub-branches of the Han clan were brought to the floating island by Yazid. As it was designed for a person only this time, Yazid did not care to take the test seriously. He had made the evaluation based on his own knowledge and preferences. However, next year, the test for the geniuses selected would be different than this one now. They were to be chosen with strict standards before they could enter the floating island. Malloy knew that the test the Han clan on the floating island had one perform was very strict and difficult, but understood that it was much easier than Yazid's. If the true god did not want Zen to pass, then Zen would never accomplish this task. It was practically impossible for Zen to resist the 5 elements destructing Thurgi for even 5 minutes. Yazid had to be entirely shameless to scheme up something like this. If he ever had the chance to go to the floating island in the future, Bentley decided that he would report Yazid to the Han clan on the floating island. His schemes would surely anger them. However, Zen did not follow Malloy's advice. He did not want to let this hard-won opportunity to go to waste, and tried his hand at this challenge for 5 minutes at the least. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of the earth cracking, metal colliding, and fire roaring echoed all around them. The sound was nearly overwhelming to Zen as it seemed to surround him. This power was proving to be terribly destructive. Zen knew Yazid had been holding back, saving his strength. He knew that the true god was much more powerful than himself. Although the chaotic power didn't look violent, it still ripped into Zen's skin like a knife. Attempting to avoid the brutal power, Zen was using several different methods including the 8 smoky melodies. It seemed to do no good as he could not get away from it all. This method had proved effective for him against proving godly warriors, and even some low-ranked true gods. However, facing a top-ranked true god was no simple task. Zen could do nothing but grit his teeth and try to withstand the onslaught. Yazid easily masked the astonishment he felt at Zen's performance behind a calm facade. In the beginning, he had no intention of using this destructive power. He had only planned to use the power of the 5 elements to defeat Zen. Very quickly though, Yazid realized that just the 5 elements wouldn't be enough to harm Zen, so he had decided to activate this destructive power. He had expected Zen to crumble and beg for mercy under the power within a few seconds. However, Zen had performed beyond his expectations, and had withstood it head-on. A half-minute went by, and Zen had still not been severely injured. Yazid couldn't help but wonder how a proving godly warrior could have such a resilient body. Yazid hesitated as he debated using more strength. His moral scruples seemed to be what were holding him back. As a top-ranked true god, it was already too much for him to use more than 10% of his strength to assess a proving godly warrior. If he were to continue on this way using the 5 elements destructing Thurgi, he would only bring shame on himself. Yazid pushed his worry to the back of his mind. He had full confidence that Zen would not last a full 5 minutes. The more violently the 5 elements tangled, the more the destructive power increased. It was becoming more and more difficult for Zen to withstand the power. Zen was in a difficult position. The destructive power continued to cut at him, and there were more and more fissures appearing on his body. Even if he could withstand it, his body would end up severely damaged. He didn't know what to do. Bentley had already given Zen another choice. The worst thing would be to give up and wait for the next year to come. It didn't truly matter that much to wait for a year. Thinking about Yazid's contemptuous look had Zen gritting his teeth so hard that they squeaked. The wind picked up and circled around Zen. The destructive power cut at Zen's legs, and through the redemption armor. He grunted as it sliced deeply into his thighs and shins, golden blood spurting from the wounds. As the golden blood streamed down his legs, it attracted the attention of some of those in the Han clan. Even though individuals with golden blood were not particularly rare in the divine land, it still surprised several of them. Despite their surprise, they did not take the revelation seriously. "You need to give up," Yazid said with a faint sneer. "The destructive power is not something you can withstand much longer. What if it breaks into your mind and destroys your soul? You don't want to die, do you?" Despite Yazid's warning, Zen did not allow his facial expression to change. He remained motionless. Master Evil sighed heavily while inside Zen's mind. He could feel how stubborn this man was. Once he decided on something, Zen would allow no one to change his mind no matter how hard they attempted to persuade him. Malloy had tried to persuade Zen out of goodwill, whereas Yazid had tried with sarcasm. Of course, Yazid did not intend to take his life, but Zen did not know that. He simply turned a deaf ear to the both of them. While allowing his body to be battered and sliced apart, Zen focused on the infinity ruler in his mind. The infinity ruler could only be activated by internal momentum, otherwise it simply floated quietly in Zen's mind. It looked ordinary with no special characteristics. The 5 elements godly way had been recorded in the infinity ruler. Zen could use several theurgies of the 5 elements godly way through it. However, the 5 elements destructing theurgy, which was a skill that Yazid had created by himself, was similar to Holy J's ice soul flame. Even the godly way tablet of the 5 elements godly way couldn't record such a skill. Would the infinity ruler be able to absorb the power of this theurgy? A bold idea came to Zen suddenly. Should he allow some of the internal momentum to dash into his mind, and let the infinity ruler absorb it? While facing a godly way tablet, Zen should be able to withstand the internal momentum of it. After all, the godly way tablet didn't have an owner, and it could only release the internal momentum automatically. Yazid was not a godly way tablet without the ability to think, so if he attempted this it would come at a high risk. Zen did not have much time to consider his decision, so he didn't bother to think it through. He began to introduce the internal momentum into his mind. When a theurgy of a godly way was performed, it would release the invisible power of internal momentum. The 5 elements destructing theurgy was no exception. Zen would bear a considerable risk if he wanted to allow the internal momentum into his mind. After all, his cinnabar field and his mind were the 2 most important parts of his body. In stunned silence, Yazid watched as Zen gave up the protection over his mind and attempted to approach the destructive power. He had just told Zen to be careful and mind his soul so it wouldn't be damaged, but this fellow was going to take the attack head-on. He had never seen such a crazy person before. Yazid didn't think Zen was trying to provoke him in any way. The others in the main hall exchanged glances with each other, completely confused about what on earth Zen was trying to do. He was simply courting death. The power of the 5 elements continued to collide with each other, and the destructive power would burst out each time the power of 2 mutually exclusive laws collided with each other. The destructive power was like an invisible blade, circling around Zen. If Yazid deliberately controlled the destructing power to kill Zen, he had no natural ability to resist it at all. However, Yazid did not see Zen as a real opponent after all. He had only used the 5 elements destructing theurgy as a test, which had given Zen the chance to carry out his plan. The internal momentum that leaked out from the destructive power was slowly slithering into Zen's mind. It proved to be incredibly powerful, and Master Evil's soul had already hidden away from it. Zen also hid his own soul deep in his mind as a precaution. If he wasn't paying close attention he would lose his soul, and that would not be fun. But the infinity ruler still continued to float in his mind quietly and did not respond. Zen wondered if he had guessed wrong. Maybe the amount of the internal momentum was still insufficient. Even with the great risks he had taken, the infinity rule remained motionless. It made Zen feel anxious. Smack! The destructive power slapped Zen in the forehead. He felt the skin open up on his forehead, and a warm gush of blood dribbled down his face. Shouts of horror and shock filled the main hall at the gruesome sight. Even Yazid was equally panicked. It was true that he did not intend to let Zen pass his test, but if he killed Zen by mistake things would not go very well for him. Despite the fact Zen brought it upon himself, the responsibility would still fall on him. "Stop, Yazid," Bentley shouted, a harsh look on his face. At the same moment, the internal momentum in his body was being slowly released. He couldn't watch Zen die in the heavenly Han house. He had failed to persuade Zen to give up, but he could at least stop Yazid. Moreover, he had long wanted to have a fight with Yazid. He brought this upon himself. Yazid explained hurriedly when he saw that Bentley was preparing his attack. Although both of them were top-ranked true gods, Bentley was much stronger than him. If Bentley really fought him out of anger, he was bound to suffer. It doesn't matter what's the reason, you must stop, Bentley ordered. His tone brooked no room for an argument. He looked as if he were ready to attack at any moment. If the two top-ranked true gods fought in the heavenly Han house, it would undoubtedly be a massive event. So Malloy and the others all stepped out to mediate. Just as the main hall erupted into chaos, two circles of golden light suddenly appeared in Zen's pupils. Chapter 1807, Breakthrough. It's that pair of eyes again, Malloy exclaimed, raising his eyebrows. The main reason Zen was easily and quickly recognized by the Godly Way tablets in the Consulting God Hall was due to his eyes. So much so in fact that some people even believed that Zen had fire god eyes. Although Bentley hadn't personally appeared at the scene, he had certainly heard of Zen's eyes with the golden rings. Upon looking at them now, he was truly impressed. Yazid's expression was also full of surprise. He had no idea how Zen could have struggled in his 5 elements destructing with such golden eyes. The infinity ruler's scale of the 5 elements godly way was flashing with a blazing golden light. At the same time, the internal momentum that rushed into Zen's mind gathered on the ruler's scale. The internal momentum absorbed by the infinity ruler wasn't the original 5 elements godly way, but the internal momentum of the 5 elements destructing, which was actually understood by Yazid himself. And as the infinity ruler absorbed the internal momentum, Zen felt as though a stream of clear water was being injected into his mind. According to the nature of the heaven and earth, water can quench fire. Fire can melt metal, and metal can chop wood. At that very moment, Zen unexpectedly understood Yazid's theurgy, the 5 elements destructing, through the infinity ruler. According to the 5 elements destructing, one element would be destroyed by another as the 5 elements restrict each other. In such a case, the 5 elements could also generate each other in order to become consummate. At that point, it becomes easy to break the 5 elements destructing. It was obviously unrealistic for Zen to break through a top-ranked true god's theurgy. Although Yazid had used his unique skill, one thing was certain, he hadn't used all his strength. Thus, Zen actually had a chance of winning. Zen's figure suddenly began to shake as the chaotic energy quickly circulated in his inner world. It immediately turned into the power of the 5 elements, which gushed out from his body like 5 distinct rivers. 5 elements godly way, one of the leaders of the Han clan sub-branches asked, as he frowned slightly. Indeed, you're correct, he is activating the 5 elements godly way. The question is, what is he trying to do? Another leader replied, his eyes still fixed on Zen. The 5 elements godly way was one of the most common godly ways in the divine land and countless people cultivated it. Yazid was capable of having his own insights when it came to the 5 elements godly way, which undoubtedly made him a top leader. If Zen used the 5 elements godly way now, it would be equivalent to displaying his measly skill before an expert. Does Zen plan to use the 5 elements godly way to break through? Quote. Malloy hesitated for a second before continuing. The 5 elements destructing, is he making a huge mistake? Malloy felt rather confused, now. If Zen couldn't see through the foundation of the 5 elements destructing, there was no way he'd successfully break through the 5 elements destructing even after he employed the 5 elements godly way. Besides, he would be taken advantage of by Yazid. After all, according to Zen's 5 elements godly way, the 5 elements would restrict one another. It was very easy for Yazid to disturb Zen's 5 elements godly way and transform the latter into the 5 elements destructing power. That's not necessarily the case. Bentley shook his head in reply. Although Zen's strength might not be even very powerful in his eyes, he was definitely not stupid. He believed that there had been a reason for him to display the 5 elements godly way. He just didn't know whether or not his situation could be changed in this case. Hearing these words, Yazid felt a little shocked. Then, he sneered and said, "Huh, does he want to die?" Under everyone's watchful eyes, Zen gently waved his hands, and the power of the 5 elements began to erupt. In terms of his control of the 5 elements godly way, Zen had already far surpassed a proven godly warrior whose main practice was exactly that. After all, the 5 elements power was formed through chaotic energy, so it wasn't weaker than the momentum that a true god could gather through the godly tile. The 5 elements destructing makes the 5 elements restrict each other and can generate the formidable power of destruction. However, if I let the 5 elements generate each other through 5 elements, power before the elements restrict one another, it's impossible for the destruction power to be generated. Splash! From behind Zen, a water dragon spiraled over and rushed toward a golden fire bird. Generally speaking, in such a situation, water would quench fire and the destruction power would be produced. Go. With a flick of both Zen's hands, a myriad of golden radiance appeared on the left one, and a faint shadow of huge wood appeared in the right. Before the water dragon had the chance to restrict the fire bird, Zen released metal and wood power in advance, in order to let metal produce water and the wood feed the fire. With the combined forces, the power of the 5 elements, foundation gradually began to transform itself. Furthermore, the power of the 5 elements became consummate, offsetting the power of destruction. It's complete. Zen smiled, and without a single moment's pause, he fell into a state of absolute concentration. As long as there were 2 of 5 elements in this area to restrict each other, Zen would use the corresponding power of the 5 elements in order to allow the elements to generate one another. Of course, at the time, Zen had no idea that it was currently completely silent inside the main hall of the heavenly Han house. The mid-rank true gods and the top-rank true gods all stared at the scene before them in disbelief. Even though Zen hadn't counteracted all of the destruction power, he had counteracted at least more than 90%. The rest of the destruction power was no longer a threat to him. In other words, this meant that Zen had been capable of breaking through the 5 elements destructing that Yazid had understood in a very short period of time. Yazid's true strength was much weaker than that of Bentley, but Yazid was a top-rank true god after all, and the 5 elements destructing that he had realized was quite famous across the divine land. Many true gods, who cultivated the 5 elements godly way, wanted to practice this theurgy, but Yazid had never taught anyone else to practice the 5 elements destructing. In fact, even his descendants didn't have a chance to learn such a theurgy from him. Now though, Zen had actually seen through the 5 elements destructing, and simultaneously, he destroyed it using extremely simple and even crude methods. Ha ha, a silly smile finally spread across Bentley's originally gloomy face. Malloy and the others fixed their eyes on Zen, with mixed emotions. Now that Zen had succeeded, the only explanation was that he had understood the 5 elements destructing. However, the 5 elements destructing simply was nothing like the godly way tablets. Because everyone was allowed to observe and comprehend the internal momentum of the godly way tablet. On the other hand though, the 5 elements destructing's internal momentum was isolated. Only Yazid himself was capable of seeing through it, and the others couldn't even figure out its mechanism. Not to mention the proving godly warriors, even Malloy and Bentley couldn't succeed such a feat. Malloy equally believed that it was impossible for a holy being to comprehend the complete internal momentum of the 5 elements destructing in a short period of time. Despite all that though, things like this did happen, even if they were rare. What Malloy didn't know was that the Infinity Ruler was an unreasonable treasure for breaking through the internal momentum. The internal momentum, which was absorbed into the Infinity Ruler, was actually constantly recorded by it. At the same time, the internal momentum would be turned into a small scale on the Infinity Ruler. There was no secret from any internal momentum before the Infinity Ruler, and all internal momentum could easily be broken by the Infinity Ruler. Yazid was stunned and could do nothing but stand still, lost in thought. He had created the 5 elements destructing, and was clear on the complexity of the latter. The 5 elements destructing was his unique method. In fact, he was the only person in the divine land to master such a theurgy. Because he had stayed on the floating island all year round and had seldom fought with other people, no one had been capable of breaking through the 5 elements destructing over the years. This didn't mean that the 5 elements destructing was invincible, though. Not at all. To the contrary, there were still numerous other theurgies that were much more powerful than the 5 elements destructing, and there were many top-ranked true gods that could defeat Yazid. The only thing was that no one could break Yazid's theurgy. This brat has even understood the 5 elements destructing's internal momentum. How is that possible? I have to kill him because he has broken my internal momentum. Among the top-ranked true gods, Yazid wasn't considered to be very powerful. He couldn't be ranked among the top true gods in the Han clan, not to mention in the divine land. Those who weren't very remarkable would cherish their theurgy very much. The 5 elements destructing was Yazid's masterpiece. No matter how Zen broke his internal momentum, Yazid simply couldn't bear watching him do it. Right then, it was extremely difficult for Yazid to suppress his evil thoughts. Suddenly, the creatures in Yazid's inner world all began quietly offering their faith energy. The faith energy intertwined into thin threads and gathered in his godly tile. The momentum that Yazid had used before was very insignificant, but now that he had the killing intent, it was different and much more meaningful. For the top-ranked true god, killing Zen was going to be a piece of cake. The moment the power began gushing out, Zen had sensed something strange. In this illusory space, the 5 elements, power that surrounded him had quickly undergone a fundamental change. If Zen had fought with little snakes before, Then now he was facing a gigantic dragon. The top-rank true god would easily suppress and even kill Zen only by means of the 5 elements, power, without ever even using the 5 elements destructing. This was the power of a top-rank true god. What? Zen's eyes froze. He had never expected Yazid to take serious action. Watch out, that old man is going to kill you, Zen. Even Master Evil had realized that Zen's actions had provoked Yazid. Chapter 1808. Mayhan. Even Master Evil hadn't said anything. Zen was already very well aware that Yazid wanted to kill him. The problem was that he didn't have the ability to fight against Yazid. All he could do now was pin his last hopes on the Han clan sub-branches. He bet that the people from the Han clan sub-branches would help him. At the very least, he truly hoped they wouldn't just watch him die at Yazid's mercy. Throughout his time there, Zen had rarely faced such danger in the evolutionary universe. Back then, never would he place his hopes on anyone else but himself, because he knew very well that if he ever placed his hopes on the wrong person, the only result would be his death. Here and now though, he was in the divine land. And Zen, who was a secondary creature and a total stranger in this place, had no choice but to take a few risks. As the power of the 5 elements surged upward, Zen suddenly heard a loud collision, followed by a muffled groan. The illusion around him completely disappeared at once. A smile of relief simultaneously spread on Zen's face. Not far away, Bentley was clenching his fists and he looked to be boiling with anger. As Yazid placed his hands on his chest and fell into the corner of a wall, he continued coughing loudly, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. And yet, no one had even seen how Bentley had done it. He was way too fast. How dare you attack me, Bentley? Yazid spat resentfully. Bentley sneered back coldly. There's nothing I wouldn't dare do. We might be just about the same age, but I am the leader of the Han clan sub-branches, after all. Let that be heard. Speaking of which, you're only a liaison from the floating island. Do you really think I can't hurt you? Even if I killed you, the main Han clan wouldn't punish me in the least. Yazid felt both scared and angry at the same time. Yazid might be a member of the main Han clan, and equally a top-ranked true god, but he wasn't valued by the main Han clan whatsoever. His mediocre talent and average strength didn't impress them at all. The liaison he served as was actually a position with little responsibilities, but because of his seniority and his cultivation level, everyone respected him. In fact, his status was even far inferior to that of Bentley. In contrast, Bentley had an eccentric character and often found himself laughing and joking with the disciples of younger generation. As the leader of the Han clan sub-branches, he was actually highly valued by the main Han clan. Over the years, the main Han clan even wanted to transfer Bentley to the floating island in order for him to serve through a meaningful position, but Bentley refused them time and time again. If he did kill Yazid, the main Han clan would certainly hold him responsible, but the punishment wouldn't be too severe, and not to mention that Bentley was reasonable on this matter. After all, it just didn't make any sense that it was just because a talent recommended by the Heavenly Han House understood Yazid's 5 elements destructing technique that Yazid wanted to kill him. Zen stood in the center of the main hall without saying a word. The old man had almost killed him, and thus, Zen didn't have a very good impression of him. As for the other leaders of the Han clan sub-branches, generally speaking, they would scheme against each other, trying to fight for the benefits of their own sub-branch. This time though, they were pleased to see that Bentley had taught Yazid a lesson. That man, I refuse to bring him into the floating island. There's just no way, Yazid said hatefully. Next year, when the Han clan sends people here, I'll go with them. As long as I'm still here, there's just no way that he's going to the floating island. To his surprise, Bentley only shrugged his shoulders and said, whatever. With that, he turned his head to look at Thad and said, for such a talent, many places will want to welcome him. Aside from the Han clan, there's the Zhang clan, Mu clan, Li clan. Just to name a few. Actually, take a second and think here. Which one of them wouldn't want him to join? If you insist on causing delay in fulfilling the Han clan's mission, then do whatever you want. But when Thad becomes famous in the near future, I'll go straight to the main Han clan in order to humiliate you directly. Zen could only smile back at Bentley's words. The other people in the main hall agreed with him, too. In their opinion, Zen's performance was no just enough to be described as amazing. He could see through and even comprehend an original godly Way-Thurgy in less than 5 minutes. His talent was outrageous. It didn't matter anymore whether or not people knew his background, all the wealthy clans would want to have him on their side and benefit from his talent. Bentley also had the intention of drawing Zen over to his side with what he had said. He knew that Zen was much more than just an ordinary talent. When it came to such a character, he would either kill him straight away, or form a good relationship with him. It was a make-or-break type of situation. As the leader of the Han clan sub-branches, Bentley was a wise man and he knew what he had to do. After a long, silent pause, Yazid stared at Bentley and snorted. "Just wait and see," he exclaimed finally. And with that, he floated into the air with the intention of leaving the heavenly Han house. But before he could get anywhere, a purple shadow suddenly floated down from the sky. It was enormous and somewhat resembled a huge flower. The glowing rays emitting from the flower were absolutely dazzling. The purple flower came to halt when it reached the top center of the heavenly Han house. One of the flower's petals gently drooped open and a woman floated down from it. She was in a magenta gauzy robe, and the corners of her elegant clothes flustered in the windy sky. Her descent made her look dynamic and charming. It didn't take long for the woman to land, and for a short while, the woman stood steadily in the main hall. She looked up at Yazid, who hovered in the air with a gentle smile on her face. Then, she fixed her eyes on Bentley and said, "We are all from the same clan. Why did you fight one another?" You're here." Bentley didn't answer her question, but calmly cupped his hands toward her. "What?" Mei Han asked, as she smiled faintly. "Am I not welcome here?" "Of course. To the contrary, we feel honored to have you here, Miss," Bentley said, a smile pursed on his lips. To be brutally honest, deep inside himself, he didn't want Mei Han to be here at all. The reason for the latter was because she was a disciple of the demi-holy being, Joy. In the test in the heavenly Han house, Zen had displayed his amazing talent. During the test, he had been acknowledged by the Godly Way tablet of the Purple Aura Godly Way. The warriors from the Han clan's 6th sub-branch had quietly sent someone to the floating island in order to inform Joy of such news. Bentley wanted to be the first one to recommend Zen to the floating island, and thus, he invited Yazid to come here. He hadn't expected to fight with Yazid, and Joy had actually acted so quickly. Before Yazid could even leave, Mei Han had arrived. In the past, he hadn't had any desire for Zen to be taken away by Joy. In that case, the Han clan sub-branches wouldn't get the credit for recommending an eligible candidate. Now though, with such a big conflict between him and Yazid, it was nearly impossible for Zen to be sent to the floating island through traditional means. There was no wondering why he thought he should take advantage of the situation and do Joy a favor. After pondering it over for a little while, his lips spread into a tight, wide smile. "I'm here for a little fellow known as Thad. My master, Joy, has heard about him and wants to take him to the floating island," Mei Han requested directly, without wasting any time. She had already cast her beautiful eyes on Zen. The people in the main hall were all the leaders of Han clan sub-branches. They were almost all mid-rank true gods, and only Zen was a proving godly warrior. Since Yazid was also here, it was easy for her to come to the conclusion that the young man standing before her was rightly Thad. Yazid had clearly stated just seconds before that Zen would have no chance of ever entering the floating island, but now, Joy had sent someone here to take Zen directly to the floating island instead. The whole thing was rather ironic. In order to impress Mei Han, Bentley smiled and spoke up, "Joy has an eye for talent. This person is indeed a rare talent. One couldn't have found such a talent among the children of the Han clan on the floating island if they had wanted to." To Mei Han though, Bentley's words didn't make any sense. The heavenly Han house was always cautious when around Joy. But why was Bentley being so cooperative today? What was wrong with him? Malloy equally bowed his head in agreement and sighed softly. He knew his only choice now was to hand Thad over to her. Yazid, who had planned to leave, was unable to accept such a result. He suddenly said, "Joy only recruits warriors that cultivate the Purple Aura Godly Way. And yet this guy doesn't have a purple power body. How did he attract Joy's attention, then? This is just ridiculous." Yazid knew that Zen had been recognized by hundreds of Godly Way tablets, but he didn't know that among them was a Purple Aura Godly Way tablet. Never in the past had he heard something so strange. A warrior without a purple power body simply couldn't cultivate the Purple Aura Godly Way. Bentley laughed. "Thad, show a few of your abilities to some of these people who seem to come from a hole in the ground." Zen responded very quickly. As soon as Bentley finished speaking, Zen gently waved his hand, and a wisp of purple mist shot up into the sky. The purple mist turned into a phoenix and circled above the sky over the heavenly Han house, before obediently landing directly on Zen's shoulder. He can turn purple mist into substance. And he is doing so with such skill. But he hasn't condensed a godly tile yet. What a strange guy, Mei thought as she sized Zen up with a strange look in her eye. Zen didn't have the purple power body, but he could certainly cultivate the purple or a godly way. This was simply incredible. And with what she had just witnessed, it was even harder for her to believe that Zen hadn't condensed a godly tile despite having mastered the technique of turning purple mist into substance. Chapter 1809, The Time C. Even though Zen wanted to explain the problem of his godly tile to Mei, he was unable to do so. He knew that it would be easier for him to condense his godly tile if he practiced the life vitality system. He could choose any one of the godly ways and condense the internal momentum he had comprehended into a godly tile. But since he practiced the primal chaos technique, it would be a gigantic task for him to condense a godly tile. Zen played a huge gamble on his part when he acquired the strange mud. But he knew he had to get it in order to condense the godly tile. Even though only a small part of it was condensed, he knew that he took the right decision. He was worried what might happen if he couldn't find this kind of mud again. Yazid was in awe and shock when he saw Zen release the purple or a godly way without much effort. He stared at Zen silently, memorizing his appearance, and then took off, making his way towards the sky. Mei grinned from ear to ear when she saw a furious Yazid leaving. She said to Bentley, "I guess the heavenly Han house must have clashed with Yazid. Otherwise, you won't let this young man go with me." Bentley shook his head in dismay. "Forget it, Mei, you had a long and arduous journey. Get some rest and you'd feel better." "I'm fine," she said. She had all her interest on Zen. She circled Zen, without taking her eyes off him. Most of Master Joy's disciples are females, and there are only 3 male disciples. I did not expect that she would have another male disciple. What? I am not looking for a new master, Zen thought. Zen craved to enter the floating island. But he had no plans to acquire a new master, he already had one. Mei was quite good at reading people's minds. "You don't want to be Master Joy's disciple?" she asked Zen. Joy was quite famous as a demi-holy being in the divine land. Only the holy emperor of the Han clan outranked her on the clan's floating island. Joy had plans of her own. She wanted to set up her own sect and create her own floating island. Many true gods sought for Joy so that they might get enlisted as her disciples. Mei was unaware of the fact that Zen had a master and he wasn't looking for another. Zen knew that even if Bromley was here in person, he wouldn't be able to teach him anything. After all, he was cultivating the chaotic energy system. He was aware of the fact that Joy was practicing the purple or a godly way. "I am not looking for a master as I already have one," Zen said, shaking his head. Mei smiled at his words. She acknowledged that Zen was indeed gifted, but he was just a proving godly warrior who had struggled in a small divine city. She wondered how his master could be superior to Joy, who was a demi-holy being. But Zen kept on insisting that he was in no need for a new master. Mei was very subtle. Joining us doesn't necessarily mean being Master Joy's disciple. It's not easy to become her disciple. It could be possible that she might not want you as her disciple, she said. She knew that Zen would make the right choice, nonetheless. Zen didn't say much now that Mei had said so. What he only wanted was to enter the floating island. Mei stayed in the heavenly Han house for 2 days. Bentley agreed on letting Zen leave with Mei. He made some sort of pact with Mei, without telling Zen much about it. Although, Zen knew that the heavenly Han house suffered losses and Joy would make up for the losses. Then, came the day when Zen packed up all his belongings and left the 6-burdened divine city, Mei beside him. Zen's talents lay no bounds. After staying at the heavenly Han house for few months, he was finally able to achieve his dream of entering the floating island. The news of him entering the floating island spread like wildfire, and once again, everyone in 6-burdened divine city started talking about him. Yet, his origin was still suspicious. The heavenly Han house figured that Zen's identity was quite suspicious and at the peril of discovery, therefore, they took necessary measures to further strengthen his fake identity and his secret was stored away for good. Mei invited Zen to the giant purple flower. She smiled as she saw him approaching her. Then together, they made their way towards the time sea. The purple flower was Mei's own creation. She built it with the help of the purple or a godly way. It was a large space treasure filled with vast space inside. However, the gap between the space within the purple flower and the purple skyland was too huge. Once inside this precious flower, Zen was unaware of what was happening outside, though he could feel that the flower was moving rapidly. Zen felt quite dreary during his time in the flower, and Mei rarely visited him. He felt as if he was wasting his talents away in here. There was no point for him to continue cultivating. He had already reached the limit of being a proving godly warrior and he could go no further. He only wished to condense the godly tile, which was his biggest hold-up. Since Zen had nothing better to do, he He went through the godly ways in the infinity ruler repeatedly in his mind. He was aware of the different types of godly ways, each having different characteristics. He knew that if used with great care and skill, they would be able to showcase extraordinary results. Zen was stuck inside the flower for about 2 months, each day proving more monotonous than the previous one. One day, Zen felt as if the flower was descending, and much to his delight, it really was. Then, it was brought to an abrupt halt. He then heard Mei's voice telling him that they had reached their destination. Zen couldn't contain his excitement as he headed outside of the purple flower. What he saw next filled him with wonder. He saw a vast colorful sea which appeared to be boundless. The various colors of the sea intertwined with one another. There was a lasting momentum within this sea, which surrounded the darkness of the world. "It's beautiful," he exclaimed. It was a sea of magnificent colors. Zen noticed how vast the sea was. He observed that the water was not ordinary, rather it was colorful. Waves swept over like colorful rainbow, which was a sight for sore eyes. "I believe it is the time sea, right?" Zen wondered out loud. Mei nodded. Seeing Zen so excited made her happy. People who lived on the floating islands could visit the time sea any time they wanted, but many proving godly warriors and even true gods had never seen it in their lives. Whoever saw the time sea for the first time would be captivated by its beauty, and the soothing colorful waves hit them like a warm summer breeze. As for Mei, the time sea was no stranger, as she was born on the floating island. But to the very this day, she was still charmed by its wonder. "It might be the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen," Zen said. He heaved a sigh of admiration. A mysterious aura seemed to hover above the time sea. He was captivated by this aura. He felt as if the sea was calling him, asking him to step into the water. He spaced out, lost in his thoughts, and started making his way towards the sea. Mei sprang into action when she saw Zen approaching the sea. She stepped in front of him and asked sternly, "What are you doing?" "I just want to see the sea water," Zen said absent-mindedly. His eyes were transfixed upon the time sea. He felt complete and had this strange yet wonderful feeling as if he was home. He felt one with the sea and had a strong urge to go into its water. Mei was watching Zen closely. "The time sea is quite dangerous," she said sternly. "I would be in great danger if I went into its water, and so would you be." Zen had this confused yet blank expression on his face. Mei patiently explained that the time sea wasn't at all what it looked like. She lay out the fact that what looked like water wasn't actually water but rather fragments of time. The time sea records whatever happened in the history, and turns it into countless fragments. If you touch one of the fragments, you would fall into that certain time period, she explained. Zen couldn't quite comprehend what he was hearing. "So I can travel to any stage of the divine land through the time sea?" he asked excitedly. "Well, it's a bit complicated than that. These are fragments of time and not a complete time passage. So when you fell into the sea, you would also be split into countless pieces and fall into different periods of time. So falling into the sea means death, believe me," Mei warned. Zen was taken aback when he heard this. A look of horror crept onto his face. Why did all the wealthy clans establish floating islands here, knowing that this place is quite dangerous? Zen asked in an alarming tone. "That's because the ruling slate is here," Mei replied calmly. Zen was still a little puzzled. The ruling slate was here didn't seem to have anything to do with the fact that those wealthy clans had built floating islands here. He still had a lot of questions, but he didn't want to annoy Mei. So he just shrugged and said nothing. Chapter 18:10. No Ferry Out of Fear. An hour had passed as Zen waited by the sea. Suddenly a small black dot appeared in the distance. As it got closer, the dot became bigger. Zen soon realized that the dot was in fact a boat sailing on the time sea. Zen refrained from asking Mei any more questions. So he decided to ask Master Evil through his mind. Mei has said anyone who fell into the time sea would face instant death. Then how is there a boat sailing on the time sea? Until now, Master Evil had been silent all along in Zen's mind. He had visited the time sea long back, and as he revisited the place again, endless thoughts were running through his mind. When he heard Zen's question, he laughed out loud. "Oh, there is a way to cross it. The materials used to make the boat are so special, that they can isolate the time law within the time sea. I personally haven't been to any of the floating islands before, but as far as I know, these boats belong to a very mysterious race called the Sun-Blind race. All the divine citizens of this race have never opened their eyes to see the world, as they are all blind. They have been sailing on the sea for generations. There were many legends about the Sun-Blind race in the divine land, and some of them were quite staggering. It was a low-key and mysterious ancient race. Not everyone was privy to their lifestyle. As Master Evil had said, everyone in the blind race was blind, but this was not important. The key point was that this race had traveled on the Time Sea before all the powerful clans occupied the Time Sea, during the ancient times. Up until now, the true gods in the Divine Land had little understanding about this race. Many of their customs and strange rules were often unfathomable to outsiders, because of which, many of the warriors from the wealthy clans considered them like a fly on the ointment. These powerful clans were the top forces of the Divine Land, and were usually domineering at an extreme level. However, they tried to avoid and even tolerated them to some extent. Because of insufficient knowledge, there were many speculations about this race from the people of the Divine Land. The boat was constantly floating on the Time Sea. It seemed to be sailing at a very slow pace, but in reality its speed was extremely fast. Zen's vision could reach 1,000 miles away at most. Within 5 minutes, the boat arrived from 1,000 miles away to where Zen was standing. As the boat approached, Zen saw that the ferryman was a strong man with crimson skin. He seemed to be blind, as his eyes were closed firmly, and his thick and powerful arms were pushing and pulling a pair of strange paddles, which seemed to be made of the backbone of some kind of gigantic fish. After the boat pulled onto the shore, the strong man stood still, while cocking his head to one side. He then asked, "Is it May who wants to cross the sea?" "Yes, it is," May replied in a gentle voice. The man nodded and steering the boat said, "Please get onto the boat." As she turned towards Zen, May stretched out her hands and grabbed him by the arm. They both leapt and landed on the boat. Again the ferryman stood still for a while and then asked, "Is there another person with you, miss?" "Yes, there are 2 of us," replied May indifferently. The ferryman still had his eyes closed, but he was facing Zen. His eyes couldn't see anything, but he seemed to have used his spiritual sense or other methods to size up Zen. He didn't move for a long time. May frowned. The rules of the Time Sea were very particular. No one could fly in the entire area of the Time Sea, nor could anyone use spatial transference. Regardless of whether it was top-rank true gods or consummate true gods, everyone had to rely on these ferrymen to cross the Time Sea, and usually it was a smooth process. She could not understand the ferryman's peculiar behavior today. She thought for a while and asked, "Why hasn't the boat started moving yet?" The ferryman did not speak, and continued to stay motionless in front of Zen. Although these ferrymen didn't have high levels of cultivation, they were indispensable in the Time Sea. The powerful clans wouldn't dare to provoke them unnecessarily. After all, the Time Sea was too dangerous. Once they got onto a boat, their lives were in the hands of ferrymen. There was no way to escape if the ferryman capsized the boat. Just imagining about falling into the Time Sea could send shivers among the people. So May waited patiently. Zen was shocked to see the ferryman suddenly open his eyes. His eyes were pure white and devoid of pupils. It was frightening to see such a sight. Moreover, the ferryman was getting very close to Zen with his face only a few inches away from Zen. Zen was completely baffled. He didn't understand the ferryman's close scrutiny. He was feeling uncomfortable with this ferryman standing so close to him. The ferryman suddenly said, "I won't ferry you across the Time Sea. Please leave the boat now." "What do you mean? Why should he leave the boat?" May's face darkened. These ferrymen had always been mild and obedient. In the Time Sea, they were like diligent and honest servants. For countless years, they had been silently serving the major clans. Except during occasions, they never went on strike or caused any kind of delay. They were always available to render their services. What was wrong with this ferryman today? Zen frowned, but didn't say anything. The reason doesn't matter. Come what may, there is no chance that I am going to ferry him. The ferryman shook his head defiantly as he retreated back to the stern of the boat. He kept the 2 paddles aside, indicating that if Zen didn't get off the boat, he would not sail. "Our Han clan has paid enough divine might coins to your race. I have some very serious work to accomplish on the floating island, and yet you refuse to ferry us across," May said in an agitated tone. She was getting impatient. The ferryman of the sun-blind race still shook his head. "This Time Sea is very dangerous, so there are many taboos in our sun-blind race. You should be aware about them." The Time Sea looked beautiful, at the same time it also looked mysterious and endless. In reality, under the gorgeous cover, it was a sea of death. Any creature that fell into the sea would be torn apart and their bodies would fall into a certain period of time. For the true gods, the Time Sea was even more terrifying than many large forbidden lands. Those forbidden places that people talked about might be frightening, but there were still many ways that people could survive. However, if they accidentally fell into the Time Sea, there was only one end, and that was death, and there was no exception. Except for the holy beings, any true gods that wanted to enter the floating islands had to be ferried by the sun-blind race. Only the sun-blind race could use the boats to conquer the time sea, which was full of restrictions. Furthermore, there were many strange rules prevalent in the sun-blind race, which were passed down from generation to generation that could not be violated. These rules were known as 4 no's. First, the sun-blind race would not ferry at midnight or noon. Second, they would not ferry during turbulent weather. What they feared was not ordinary storms. Once a storm broke out in the time sea, it would be devastating to all the creatures on the sea. Third, no ferry on the astronomical transit day. The astronomical transit day was a grand holiday of the sun-blind race. In this day, there was no boat on the time sea, and no one could pass through it. Fourth, no ferrying anyone out of fear. If there was someone on the boat that made the ferryman afraid, they would not ferry the person. Of course May was aware of the rules. But still she thought for a moment and wondered, it is neither midnight nor noon. There is no violent storm brewing in the sea. Today is not even the astronomical transit day. Then why won't you let him inside the boat? Because I'm afraid of him, the ferryman of the sun-blind race said. Afraid? That is just a proving godly warrior. What is the need for you to be afraid of him? May asked curiously. She knew that once these guys of the sun-blind race made up their minds, it was very difficult to convince them otherwise. Zen was completely confused with the ongoing situation. For the life of him, he could not understand the ferryman's despair, and he also became vigilant. The sun-blind race were known to have extraordinary senses. Once his origins, or some of the flaws in himself which he even didn't know were revealed, it would be troublesome. The ferryman shook his head and said, I'm afraid of him. His aura is not right. Hearing this, May felt helpless. There was no way she could deal with the sun-blind race with force. No floating island resident would dare to offend this mysterious race. If the ferryman refused to ferry him across, then that was the end of discussion. There was no way he would be able to enter the floating island. So is there any other way for him to enter the floating island? May asked again, looking at the ferryman hopefully. In her mind, if this sun-blind man was not willing to ferry Thad, the only other way would be to ask her master to personally come. The master had the ability to send Thad to the floating island, but it was too trivial a matter to ask for her presence. Moreover, Thad was not qualified to enjoy such a privilege. I think my father can do the job. My father and my brother may not be afraid of him, the ferryman said. The members of the sun-blind race were divided into various ranks. Because of their mysterious lifestyle and their seldom communication to outsiders, they all looked the same. It was very difficult to make out their difference physically. Although May had traveled on the time sea many times, she didn't really know them. Even she felt that all the sun-blind members looked exactly the same. Chapter 18:11. The Emperor Resentment. The ferryman's words alleviated May's anger. With a light flick of her hand, she threw 2 divine mite coins toward the ferryman. But instead of taking the 2 divine mite coins, the ferryman just waved his hand lightly and sent them flying back to May. He shook his head and said, "You have already paid the price. We won't charge you twice." Then, the ferryman suddenly stood up and turned his face to the time sea with his eyes still closed. He moved his lips, but no sound left his mouth. No one knew what he was saying. The sun-blind members had a special ability. No matter where one was in the time sea, as long as they stood on the shore, they didn't need to send any messages or inform anyone, and the sun-blind members would come to them as soon as possible without wasting any time. In the remote ages, the Hall of Holy Beings hadn't been established and there were no floating islands in the time sea. At that time, if a true god wanted to explore the time sea, they only needed to bring a few divine mite coins with them. After the sun-blind members reached the shore, they would ask if the true god wanted to explore the time sea. Later, the Hall of Holy Beings was established and the time sea became occupied by the wealthy clans. The Hall of Holy Beings and the leader of the sun-blind race reached an agreement. Other than the members of the wealthy clans, the sun-blind members usually wouldn't ferry a true god who didn't belong to these wealthy clans. That was why after May and Zen stayed at the shore for a while, a sun-blind member came with a boat. Zen and May waited in the boat for a long time. Finally, 2 small black dots appeared on the surface of the colorful sea. 2 boats were approaching them rapidly, one after the other. The boat in the front was controlled by a burly man, while the boat in the back was being steered by a stooping old man. Apparently, these 2 men were the ferryman's brother and father respectively. The 2 men slowly drew the boats and came closer. Once the 3 sun-blind members converged, they talked to one another in secret for a while without making so much as a sound. The only sign that they were even communicating was the slight trembling of their lips. Zen and Mei had no idea what they were talking about. After this secret exchange, the old man said to Zen, "Get in my boat and I'll take you there." Seeing that the old man had agreed to ferry Zen, Mei let out a sigh of relief. She nodded at Zen and said, "Go ahead. See you on the floating island." Zen leapt up and landed firmly in the old man's boat. Once Zen was seated, the old man set down the 2 huge bone oars he had been holding and gently swung his arms to row the boat. This boat was like a flood dragon that dove into the water, closing toward the colorful sea. Creak, creak, the pair of bone oars made a piercing sound, sending waves rolling on both sides of the boat. A few waves leapt up in the air, releasing a strong power of time law. The time law was not condensed by life vitality. It was the real time and history of the divine land. For example, although Zen had only come on board the Sun-Blind members' boat an hour ago, that event had already become a historical record in the Time Sea. Theoretically, the Time Sea had recorded everything that had happened since the divine land was born, but all of that information had turned into time fragments and joined the Time Sea. It was almost impossible to accurately find a period in such a vast sea, as it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. As the boat drifted farther and farther away, it sped up. It was not until then that Zen noticed the cyan light that had begun to emit from the old man's bone oars. Every time he rowed the boat, the cyan light would spread out and circle the bottom of the boat. It was this cyan light that allowed the boat to travel in the Time Sea. The Sun-Blind race had been in the Time Sea for so many years that it was no surprise that they had their own secrets. Otherwise, why would the wealthy clans here rely on the Sun-Blind members to ferry them? The old man kept his head low in an attempt to avoid communication with Zen, but Zen couldn't help but ask, "Just now, your son said that he didn't want to ferry me because he was afraid of me. Why did he say that?" Creak, creak. As the waves flowed, the old man continued to row the boat with his sturdy arms, spreading cyan light into the sea. After a long silence, he opened his mouth and said, "The Time Sea is a sea of death for people like you." Zen nodded in understanding. "I've heard that any creature that falls into the Time Sea will be torn into pieces by the time law, and then travel to different times." The old man of the Sun-Blind race chuckled as he rowed the boat. He then said, "That's true for people like you. Even the best of the true gods would die if they were to fall into the Time Sea. But that's not the case for the creatures living in this sea." "Living in this sea? You mean there are other creatures in the Time Sea?" Zen's face lit up with surprise. "If not, how did you think the Sun-Blind race conquered this sea area? Where did this boat and this pair of bone oars come from?" The old man asked in reply. In fact, Zen had asked Master Evil about this before, but Master Evil had only told him that the Sun-Blind race had their own way of traveling in the sea, and Zen hadn't thought much about it after that. But now, Zen was immediately enlightened by the old man's words. "You mean the boat and the bone oars came from the creatures in the Time Sea?" "Yes," the old man answered with a mysterious smile. "The bone oars were made from the spine of the ghost-swimming fish. After the Sun-Blind warriors caught the ghost-swimming fish using a special method they had developed, they would peel the whole fish alive and extract the spine to refine it through the method passed on to them from their ancestors. It was from using this method that they obtained this special pair of bone oars. As for the boat they were using, it was covered with the skin of the magic dragon fish, which allowed the boat to travel freely in the Time Sea. Both the ghost-swimming fish and the magic dragon fish were creatures that lived in the Time Sea. Owing to their many years of evolution, these creatures were free to roam through time without fear of the tearing power of the Time Sea. It turns out that the Time Sea is not a dead sea," Zen muttered as his eyes flashed. The evolution of nature was indeed miraculous. He then asked, "But what does it have to do with your son being afraid of me?" The old man paused for a moment before answering, "There are many unknown powerful creatures in the Time Sea, the strongest one is called the Emperor Resentment. You have a peculiar aura that is very similar to that of the Emperor Resentment." Rowing in the Time Sea was not a smooth journey for the Sun-Blind race. Although the Time Sea looked beautiful and quiet on the surface, there were many dangers lurking underneath. The Sun-Blind members could die if they were not careful enough, which was why there were many taboos and rules in their clan. Fortunately, as long as they followed the rules, it was very safe to travel in the Time Sea. However, there was one risk that could not be avoided: encountering a sea monster, the Emperor Resentment. The legends of the Emperor Resentment existed not only in the Sun-Blind race, but also in the Divine Land. However, the Emperor Resentment was too mysterious. No one had seen its complete form so far. If the sea monster truly began hunting in the Time Sea, there was no possibility of any warrior inferior to a holy being making it out alive. Once, in the Middle Ages, an emperor resentment had dragged a holy being into the time sea, intending to kill him. However, as long as the universe created by a holy being existed, the holy being would be immortal and their body would not be destroyed. As such, the holy being finally escaped from the time sea after years of entanglement with the emperor resentment. Although the holy being hadn't been taken down by the emperor resentment, he had still been very embarrassed. Some people listed the emperor resentment as a true spirit, but most agreed that the strength of the emperor resentment was far beyond the strength of an ordinary true spirit, because even a holy being could not do anything to it. I have an aura similar to that of the emperor resentment. The old man's answer had only increased Zen's puzzlement. Zen hadn't been aware that he had such a peculiar aura. Yes, the old man said. My son is young, and hasn't seen the emperor resentment. But I saw the emperor resentment in the last divine era. Well, technically, I saw its hand. His face was full of fear and sadness, as if talking about it reminded him of a sad memory. It was said that the appearance of an emperor resentment would bring about a devastating disaster. It would not be unreasonable to think that the emperor resentment had caused a heavy blow to the old man. Even though a divine era had passed since the last time he had seen one, he became immersed in sorrow as soon as he thought about it. Chapter 1812. The Luo Clan. The old man of the sun-blind race didn't tell Zen what had happened back then, nor did he tell him what the emperor resentment actually looked like. In fact, the sun-blind members were people of few words. They ferried people on the time sea, but they seldom spoke with their guests. In other words, it was already pretty obscure for the old man to be talking so much with Zen. Ultimately, the old man ended up inviting Zen to his race in the astronomical transit day. Zen was curious about the sun-blind race, and thus he accepted the invitation without a second of hesitation. He didn't feel anything strange in the moment, but when he arrived at the floating island, he realized that even the ordinary warriors on the floating islands had never been invited by the sun-blind race before. 2 hours later, the scenery around the boat vanished. From their point of view, it appeared as though nothing else existed between heaven and earth on the boundless time sea, nothing except the elderly man, Zen, and the boat. Unknowingly, Zen began to fall into an extremely tired and sleepy state. He couldn't help but yawn continuously. In his mind, he then tried checking in on Master Evil's soul. To his surprise though, Master Evil was in deep slumber. Zen was puzzled. The old man said flatly, on the time sea, many people lose their time judgment. Although we are on the sea for only 2 hours, you probably feel as though your body has gone through a long passage of time. You'll be tired and that's normal. If you are, don't hesitate in resting. So that's how it is. The old man's words were like magic. Zen felt his eyelids getting heavier, fighting to stay open and inevitably closing into complete darkness. He didn't even realize that he was falling asleep. Creak, creak. Zen didn't know how long he had slept, and he woke to the only sound of bone oars. When he opened his eyes, still in a daze, he saw nothing but giants filling the sky. Those are the floating islands. Zen came back to himself in a flash. At the same time, Master Evil said lazily in Zen's mind, well, those should be the floating islands of the wealthy clans. This is the first time I've actually seen them. The floating islands were extremely high in the sky above the time sea, and each of them was incomparably huge. There were no words to describe their sizes. The floating islands were like the cloud hall in the central region, but they were thousands of times, no, tens of thousands of times, larger. Each of them was a huge city, quietly floating in the air. These floating islands were not arranged in a line. Instead, they rose in spirals and extended all the way into the highest of skies. A few of the floating islands were so high up that they were surrounded by thick clouds. Zen was unable to see exactly how high they reached. Yes, we have arrived, the old man replied lightly, as though reading Zen's mind. As he spoke, he rowed the boat to the center of the sea. In front of them was a huge disk floating in the air. Although it was hovering, it was only 4 feet high from the sea's surface. This disk was a public floating dock located just beneath the floating islands. Standing at the side of the dock, Mei had arrived ahead of Zen. Upon seeing him, she waved at him. The old man continued rowing the boat until he reached the dock. After expressing his thanks, Zen leapt onto the dock and landed with a thud on the disk. The old man waved his hand toward Zen and said, if you want to come to our race's celebration on the astronomical transit day, just wait for me right here when the day comes. And with that, he turned the boat around and started moving away in the opposite direction slowly. As Mei listened to this quick conversation, her bright beautiful eyes flashed a strange color and then, she stared at Zen. Her expression was confusing to Zen. Although the woman was a top-ranked true god and a senior, Zen couldn't help but tease her, "Is there something on my face?" May shook her head. "Did I hear him wrong? Did he just invite you to their celebration on the astronomical transit day?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, he did. What's wrong with that?" Zen blinked and had no idea why May looked so surprised. After all, it was just a celebration in his eyes. "Oh my goodness, how can that be?" May took a deep breath and looked at Zen meaningfully. "I really don't know what kind of secret you're keeping. You've even been invited to participate in the celebration on the astronomical transit day." As far as she knew, although there were no holy beings among the guests invited by the sun-blind race, they were mostly major clan patriarchs. Even a few demi-holy beings would attend this famous celebration. Joy had once received an invitation as well. The sun-blind race was a very low-key race, but they were the race that knew the most when it came to the time sea. The wealthy clans had been fighting with each other so many years, but they all chose to cultivate a good relationship with the sun-blind race, and of course, they had a good reason to do so. May, on her behalf, was a mere top-rank true god. Although she was the closest person to Joy, she knew little about the sun-blind race. She was very surprised that Zen would ever be invited. "Let's go." Noticing that Zen still looked confused, she sighed to herself. As it stood, this time, she had made the right decision in helping her master bring Zen back. She wondered what would happen to him once he entered the floating island. On the large, hovering disc where Zen stood were also several smaller round discs, packed tightly together. After the two of them stepped onto one same small disc, which was no more than 10 feet wide, the disc began to slowly rise and flew into the air. Zen was interested in everything here. He looked around himself with his eyes wide. It wasn't long before he came close to the first floating island, which was also the lowest one. On the side of the floating island, the surname, Lu, was carved in giant letters. This island was easily 1,000,000 feet high, 1,000,000 feet wide, and incomparably huge. "The Lu clan?" Zen asked in a low voice as he noticed the word. May smiled at his question. If it had been any other proving godly warrior who had asked her this stupid question, she probably wouldn't have even bothered explaining a thing. She thought highly of this little guy though, so she explained patiently, "Yes. This is the Lu clan's floating island. It's the weakest wealthy clan. It used to be one of the top 10 wealthy clans. A huge change happened to the clan 60 divine eras ago, and it has thus fallen to this point. Today, they even face the risk of being squeezed out of the wealthy clans." Zen nodded slightly. Even the strongest clan in the divine land wouldn't consistently remain in the front or always have the greatest advantage. In the river of time, if they didn't work hard to maintain their position, they would fall off the stage. The disc beneath their feet didn't rise fast, which gave Zen time to look over it. There were many cities on the floating island, and these cities looked no smaller than the 6th burden divine city. That said though, the Lu clan's floating island seemed to be rather old and dilapidated. More so, the entire floating island was covered with dust. Soon, Zen's vision was filled with the second floating island. The Xie clan, a wealthy clan that ranks second to last. It has been one of the wealthy clans for 110 divine eras, but has always been ranked second to last. It hasn't gone up or gone down, ever, explained May before Zen could utter a single question. The Xie clan's floating island was completely different from the Lu clan's. The entire island was covered in lush trees, and from the outside, Zen couldn't even spot a single building. The disc continued moving upward. This time, Zen found himself looking at a dark floating island. The floating island seemed to have been burned to ashes. The outside of the island was charred, like a chunk of pure black charcoal floating in the air. There was no trace of life on the island, but dead silence seemed to reign there. As for the large character carved on the outer side of the island, it was incomplete. A strange look appeared on Zen's face. He looked at the blurry and incomplete letter and tried to distinguish it. Is it the Ling clan? Or the Lan clan, perhaps? What happened to this floating island? Did someone set it on fire or something? May smiled. No, neither. It's the Luo clan. It used to be one of the top 10 wealthy clans, but now, it has been destroyed. Every once in a while, the island will drop by one rank. There is no one on this island, and its ranking will keep falling. I believe that before long, it will fall directly into the time sea. What she said was unintentional, but the listener suddenly became more thoughtful. Zen stiffened upon hearing her words. The Luo clan. Master Evil exclaimed in Zen's mind. So this is supposed to be your father's floating island. It was Master Evil's first time entering the time sea. And it was quite an eye-opener for him. Although he didn't know much about the disputes among the wealthy clans, he did know about Mike's death. As a holy being, Mike had his own floating island in the Time Sea, but Master Evil never expected that the Luo clan's floating island would be in such a state. Chapter 1813, Meet Quentin again. As the son of a holy being, Zen could be considered a member of a noble clan. Zen had heard of the noble clans of the floating islands before, but he had never imagined what the real Luo clan would look like. It had never occurred to him that the floating island owned by the Luo clan would be in such a state when he first laid eyes on it. How prosperous had this island used to be? How many disciples, true gods and talents had the Luo clan once had? Now though it had been turned to ash. What was once full of life and color was gray and listless. May was talented when it came to reading others' facial expressions. Even a minute change would not escape her notice. Taking in Zen's expression, she smiled and said, "I forgot that your surname is Luo. Are you a member of this clan?" "A member of the Luo clan?" Zen was slightly stunned at the question. He smiled and shook his head. "Of course not. My surname just also happens to be Luo. It is sad though," he said, turning back to the scenery before him. Seeing the state of the clan. Although the storm in his heart was raging, he did his best to keep it from showing on his face. He needed to be calm. The Luo clan had lost the support of the holy beings, and it did not take long for their island to fall into disrepair. The noble clans were eager to draw a line between them and anyone that had something to do with the Luo clan. If Zen admitted that he was a member of the clan, he would only cause trouble for himself. Of course, if you were a member of the Luo clan, you would have known what had happened to this floating island, May said indifferently. There were many divine citizens whose family name was Luo throughout the divine land. May had no reason to doubt Zen's words. What happened on this island? Why would it have ended up like this? Zen asked. He was extremely curious as to the answer. The only thing Zen was aware of was that his father had offended the Hall of Holy Beings, and that he had a terrible grudge against Murphy. Even knowing that, he still didn't know the true reason. This is the punishment from the ruling slate. Mysterious bolts of lightning had attacked the floating island. They were enough to completely destroy the entire island, May said. Zen nodded and asked, why would the bolts of lightning attack the floating island? What did the Luo clan do? Who had they offended? The questions just seemed to pour out of him. Zen wanted to take this opportunity to get more information. That way, he could also eliminate May's suspicion of him. After all, he really knew nothing about what happened to the Luo clan, which worked in his favor. Her answer was a disappointment though. This was a fight between the holy beings, true gods would not be privy to that information. May shook her head. It was believed that Mike had betrayed the Hall of Holy Beings in the past, and no one knew his motivation for doing so. It had been buried and hidden like a dirty secret. After so many years, the Luo clan had almost been forgotten by many of the true gods. This island seemed to be the last thing left that might have been able to trigger some people's memories of that time. Before long the floating island would fall into the Time Sea. When that happened, the last trace of the Luo clan would vanish. Seeing as May didn't have the answer he needed, Zen didn't ask any further questions. As they rose higher and higher upon the disk, Zen was able to see more and more of the floating islands. He could see those of the Gongsun clan, the Yang clan, and the Shui clan. Floating islands appeared one after another, all of them connected to form a spiral. The spiral disappeared into the horizon as if they were steps leading to a tower in the sky. The geography and scenery of each island was different. Some were covered in lush, green trees while others were occupied by exquisite and luxurious buildings. There was even a massive, sparkling blue lake on an island. As Zen continued to rise, there were many similar disks zipping past him and May. They seemed to be a form of transportation between the islands. Most of those using the disks were true gods, but some were proving godly warriors, although there were very few. Ha ha ha, a hearty, bellowing laugh caught Zen's attention, his ears hurting slightly at the booming voice. Someone seemed to be enjoying themselves as if no one was around. There was a disc not too far away moving in the same direction as the one Zen was on. A group of young true gods stood gathered on the disc, laughing and talking. There were 7 warriors in total, and as Zen looked harder he was able to see that they were low-rank true gods. They must have just condensed their godly tiles a few years ago. The confused sound reached Zen's ears, and the one that had made the sound looked directly at him. They were only 100 feet from each other now. Their eyes met almost immediately. Quentin, Zen whispered. Zen was astonished, his heart skipping a beat. When they had been in the divine refinement forbidden land, in order to help Lucille and others get a place to cultivate the pristine life vitality, Zen had fought Quentin. Quentin, like Laquisha, was a disciple on the floating island of a noble clan. He had not expected to see him here. Zen assumed that Quentin wouldn't recognize him. His appearance had changed since he had last seen Quentin, so he hoped that was enough. The issue was though, that in order to beat Zen during their fight, Quentin had used wishing spell. According to the rules of the wishing spell, as long as Quentin didn't kill Zen, his cultivation would never improve. Another issue was that after casting the wishing spell, Quentin would be able to sense it if his target was within range. Quentin continued to stare at Zen from afar in mild confusion. "Quentin, what are you looking at?" a low-rank true god beside him asked. Quentin stared a little harder at Zen and answered, "Nothing." "Do you know that guy?" another warrior close to him asked. "No," Quentin mumbled, shaking his head. "I just had a strange feeling." "Ha ha ha, maybe you are just oversensitive right now. Your body just finished recovering, and you still need rest. Don't think too much on it," another said. May glanced between Zen and the other disc. "Is he an old friend of yours?" she asked quietly. "He's not familiar to me at all, no," Zen quickly stated. "It's strange that he keeps staring at me, though. That is the young master of the Qin clan. Rumor has it that he was injured during a battle in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land," May said in a low voice. "He stupidly used the wishing spell, and the man who defeated him escaped and disappeared. It was some secondary creature in some random universe. Not even the holy beings of the Qin clan can find him. Since he is the young master of the Qin clan that has been to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, he should be proving godly warrior at that time, right? How did he become a true god from a world lord if he was unable to fulfill the wish he made with the spell?" Zen asked, perplexed. He knew the consequences of not fulfilling the wish one made when casting the wishing spell. If the wish was not fulfilled, the caster's cultivation would be restricted permanently. It was beyond him that Quentin had managed to get around such a restriction. Back then, both Zen and Quentin had been at the same level of cultivation. Now, not only had Quentin broken the restriction of the wishing spell, but he had also become a low-rank true god. Zen was lagging behind. No one is supposed to be able to get around the restriction of the wishing spell. Quentin should feel lucky that he is an important figure in the Qin clan. The Holy Emperor of the Qin clan personally helped him to stop the restriction for the time being. However, it is only temporary. If he wants to remove the restriction, he still has to find that secondary creature and kill him, May explained. The power of the Han clan and Qin clan was nearly equal. The two clans competed with each other from time to time. May was very familiar with all the happenings in the Qin clan, and could talk about it with great familiarity. He lost to a secondary creature. It seems that it would be difficult to find the person, Zen echoed. A strange feeling began to settle in his chest. He wondered what May would think if she knew that the secondary creature that Quentin was searching for was him. "Of course he can't find him," May replied with a smile. Since the restriction of the wishing spell was blocked by the Holy Emperor of the Qin clan, Quentin's ability to identify Zen was weakened. It was why Quentin had only felt slightly strange when meeting his gaze. What a strange set of circumstances. If the Holy Emperor hadn't interfered, Quentin would have recognized Zen right away. No matter how much Zen's outer appearance had changed, it wouldn't change the fact the magic of the wishing spell would recognize its target. Although Quentin had become a true god with the aid of the Holy Emperor, he gave up the one thing that would have helped him fulfill his wish. It was unfortunate for Quentin, as this would have been the perfect opportunity for him. The small disc that carried Quentin and the others suddenly changed direction, and headed towards a massive floating island off in the distance. It was owned by the Qin clan, which happened to be ranked 11th in the Time Sea. As they floated away, Quentin couldn't stop himself as he looked over his shoulder to look at Zen again. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was right in front of him. The floating island of the Han clan was ranked 10th in the Time Sea, so it was higher than that of the Qin clan. They only rose for a short moment when the vast island of the Han clan finally appeared before him. Each clan's floating island had a style all their own. Some had a style that was a little more wild while others liked to have a more delicate look. The Han clan liked their island to be delicate. It was inlaid with white jade, making the entire island look incredibly elegant. Chapter 1814. Enter the Purple Soul Hall. The clouds around the floating island of the Han clan were unmoving and unnaturally quiet. It brought about a mysterious atmosphere, almost too calm to enjoy. Just then, Zen was on the disc and gracefully rose up into the sky. As he stood there, he looked down at the Time Sea. From up there, the floating islands below resembled a pearl necklace floating majestically above the ocean. He even caught sight of the center of the divine land. However, he could not seem to figure out where the Hall of Holy Beings was because of the thick clouds that surrounded him. For all he knew, Formidable power could have been contained in those clouds, but it was too difficult to see through them. As he kept on moving and searching around, the disc he was on finally approached the giant floating island of the Han clan. Once it landed, Mei jumped off first in pure excitement. Zen followed suit and leapt off. As soon as they were off the disc, it hovered into the air and automatically flew back to its dock at the bottom. Mei continued to lead Zen forward. You can enter the floating island because you have a purple power body, she explained. But I'll take you to the Purple Soul Hall first. The floating island of the Han clan was divided into two separate parts. The members of the Han clan took up most of the area, while 1/6 of the entire island belonged to Joy. Joy, the demi-holy being of the Han clan, built the Purple Soul Hall on the island, so it did not have any connection or relation to the Han clan at all. It was solely Joy's place, and she was the master. Because Zen was not yet part of the Han clan, Joy freely invited him to the Purple Soul Hall. I do not seem to have a purple power body, Zen said with concern in his eyes. Mei responded, I know, but as far as I'm concerned, you can cultivate the purple or a godly way. You probably have the purple power body already. Zen didn't know what to respond. He was not planning on explaining the matter of the Infinity Ruler, because that would be an easy giveaway. If she thought that he had the purple power body, then he decided it would be best to just let her believe so. All along, Zen thought they were going to the city. However, Mei made a detour and didn't bring him there at all. Not long after, they finally reached their destination, the Purple Soul Hall. The Purple Soul Hall was a very large, glorious, and luxurious place. There were beams of purple light slowly flowing in random patterns with unique energies and auras. Zen even suspected that the entire palace was formed through the grand purple aura technique. Mei, you're back. As soon as they reached the gate, a woman dressed in blue walked up to them in a hurried pace. She had the cultivation base of a low-rank true god, yet did not seem so intrigued to meet Mei, a top-rank true god. She just greeted to her casually, as if they were longtime friends. At the same time, she glanced at Zen who was behind Mei, and a mix of shock and happiness plastered across her face. Everyone, come here and have a look, she exclaimed. Mei has found another junior for us. He is a young man. Upon hearing what the woman in blue said, about 10 women immediately rushed out from random areas and made their way towards them. Some of them were proving godly warriors and others, low-rank true gods. They all had distinct yet attractive appearances, and seeing that all of them were women, they also probably didn't see men so often. Perhaps this was why they rushed to see Zen. Seeing their reactions, Mei rolled her eyes, saying, my master isn't strict enough with them, so they always behave like this. You'll get used to it. Although many warriors in the Divine Land possessed the purple power body to cultivate the purple or a godly way, they were merely a small part of the many divine citizens. Still, it was a coincidence that they were able to gather in the Purple Soul Hall. Here, Joy and the others didn't have any sense of superiority or inferiority. Therefore, in the Purple Soul Hall, the disciples saw one another as peers, with Joy as the all-knowing master. The atmosphere was always respectful and pleasant, and everyone got along with whoever was there. Notably, there were very few male disciples residing in the Purple Soul Hall, so every male disciple caused a ruckus among the females. Soon, a dozen pretty women surrounded Zen, and some even pointed at him without hesitation. Is he from a poor family? He wears a simple long robe. Does he always dress so simply? Hey, I don't feel the aura of the purple power body coming from him. Can he even manage to cultivate the purple or a godly way? Who cares? He is very handsome. Is he really the person recommended by the heavenly Han house? Hearing all these murmurs, Zen couldn't help but break a sweat. A few drops trickled from his forehead down to his neck as he realized he had never been put in this situation before. Should he have been here in the first place? Everyone, our junior fellow disciple has just arrived. He must be tired because of the long journey, so I must arrange a place for him to rest now. Don't make any noise. Mei already knew this was going to happen, and she also knew that there was no way to get out of it. There were two kinds of disciples in the Purple Soul Hall. The first type were the ones taught by Joy personally, while the second type were the ordinary disciples. Mei was one of the disciples who Joy handpicked, but she didn't dare to berate other female disciples. If she did that, she knew they would throw a fit. If the master knew such things, she would not scold those disciples who disobeyed the rules but instead, would rebuke Mei. As a result, there were no rules in the Purple Soul Hall. All of them treated each other as blood sisters. Well, I don't really think I'm your junior fellow disciple, Zen said to Mei. Mei let out a disheartened smile. Even though you are not accepted as a disciple, we will take you as our junior fellow disciple. Male disciples in our Purple Soul Hall are very popular, and very rare. Zen remained speechless once again. Everything was normal on the way to the Purple Soul Hall, but things changed so drastically just because of these women. Hi, nice to meet you, my dear junior. Your physical age seems less than 100 years old. Is that right? You are so young. Let me be the one to arrange his living space. I can also tell him about the rules of the Purple Soul Hall. With the enthusiastic help from the giddy female disciples, Zen was able to settle down quite smoothly. The Purple Soul Hall occupied 1/6 of the area of the floating island, while the number of the female disciples who had the purple power body was only 1/10 of that of the Han clan's disciples. That made the Purple Soul Hall quite large in comparison to the rest of the places, so Zen got his own place just for him. The fact that Joy owned this entire place showed that she was quite influential. If the land on the floating island could be sold, the floating islands would probably be the most expensive place in the Divine Land. Even the disciples from the Han clan were only given small living places if they did not have the special identity and high status. Ordinary outer disciples who entered the floating island resided in a common room, and the true gods were no exception to this. But Joy, however, was very nice to those who followed her and gave them the best benefits as the master. She was the one to personally ask the Holy Emperor of the Han clan to give her such a large chunk of land. But because there were only a few of them, the place was more than enough for all of them to thrive individually and together. Zen was allocated to a small palace as soon as he came in, and this made the other members envious of him. However, they knew that they didn't have the purple power body, so they couldn't enter the Purple Soul Hall under any circumstances anyway. At night, the thick fog still hovered over the floating island, but it lightened a little bit compared to earlier in the day. With the dim moonlight, Zen could tell the giant islands above him, looking like giant meteors in the sky. They were the floating islands of other several great clans. The Luo clan has its own floating island. As a holy being, my master must have one island too. Why didn't I see his island on the way? Zen asked Master Evil. Although this was the first time Master Evil had ever entered the floating island, he was possibly already knowledgeable about these things because he had lived in the Divine Land for a long time. Ha ha, Holy Bromley is very formidable, even though his clan is not regarded as very powerful. Although he has only accepted 2 disciples, they prove to be top warriors with extraordinary strengths. With these 2 remarkable disciples alone, the floating island of the Gu clan always managed to be ranked as one of the top 5 islands. That was the situation before I was taken away by Bromley. I have no clue of what is its ranking now. But, I know that it must be above the Han clan's island, Master Evil explained. He didn't know much, but this was already common knowledge. So this means that the Gu clan's floating island is located at a higher place. Zen responded as he absorbed everything Master Evil said. When he heard Master Evil mention the 2 disciples of his master, Zen suddenly recalled the time he met Gus along his journey on the true path. At that time, Gus had given Zen some advice and recommended the 8 smoky melodies, Thunderbolt Annihilation and enemy repelling arts for Zen to cultivate. I don't know the actual names of my master's 2 disciples, Zen uttered. Hearing this, Master Evil let out a soft chuckle. As the junior fellow disciple of Augustus Yu and Halat Jing, you don't even know their names. You truly are quite a joke, Zen. Chapter 18:15, Rules of Ruling Slate. Halat, Augustus. It was the first time that Zen had heard of those names. Yes, although Bromley is a holy being, his descendants didn't flourish and the number of Gu clan's members is small. However, the 2 disciples he has taken are quite outstanding. His first disciple, Halat in particular, is most likely to become a holy being, Master Evil explained. Halat was the first disciple, and Bromley's another disciple called Gus who Zen had seen before was his second disciple. With these 2 men taking care of you on the time sea, you should have been able to do whatever you want, Master Evil joked. Unfortunately, when it came to one's background, Zen had a higher starting level than many core disciples from numerous wealthy clans. Unfortunately, Zen's opponent was too strong. In any case, his first concern was Murphy and even the whole Hall of Holy Beings as well. Even if Halat and Augustus were very powerful, they might not be able to protect Zen if he just showed up randomly. Clearly, now isn't the right time for me to find them, Zen said with a shake of his head. The relationship among Mike, Bromley, and Jay might be known in the Hall of Holy Beings. Mike had been expelled, Bromley wasn't in the Divine Land, and Zen did not know about Holy Jay's whereabouts. Therefore, Bromley's disciples were likely to be under Murphy's watch. Thus, Zen wasn't so stupid as to show up suddenly. Well, it is not suitable to meet them on the floating island, but because of this relationship you have with them. Of course, there will be opportunities in other places, Master Evil said with a mysterious smile. Upon hearing those words, Zen's eyes went wide. Other places? He asked. Master Evil continued, you don't know much about the Divine Land. Well, do you remember asking me about the use of the Divine Might coins? Zen's eyes lit up at the memory. Right, you said you will tell me the use of the Divine Might coins when we get to the floating island. Well, now is the time. Ever since he became familiar with the customs of the Divine Land, he had great doubts about the Divine Might coins. The black discs didn't look too valuable, but their exchange value was quite high. Even if a proven godly warrior had worked hard for so many years, it was still difficult for them to obtain a Divine Might coin. Therefore, such a currency was deemed as unimaginable in the universe. It could be inferred that the Divine Might coin wasn't a currency released by a clan. Thus, it was safe to say that the Divine Might coins were very important and could play a great role on all the third tier, second tier and even the first tier clans. Ha ha, do you know what is the most powerful in the Divine Land? Master Evil laughed. Until this point, he still intended to keep Zen on his toes. Holy beings? Zen asked tentatively. Master Evil shook his head. The younger warrior thought for a moment, then he lit up in realization. If it's not the holy beings, then it should be the slate, he said with finality. The slate he had mentioned was the 10,000 Commandments slate, also known as the ruling slate. Not even the holy beings could resist the slate, which was worthy enough to be known for its strength alone. Bingo. Master Evil nodded then continued, there are all sorts of rules on the ruling slate which have been accumulated through countless divine eras. It is also the product of constant compromise and negotiation between these holy beings from the great clans. Do you know how these rules were written on the slate? Written by hand every now and then? Zen asked. That was the way the rules on the 10 Commandments slates and 100 Commandments slates in the divine cities and central divine cities had been written. Thus, Zen thought that the ruling slate was the same. However, Master Evil didn't know whether to cry or to laugh at Zen's curious answer. Do you think the ruling slate is an ordinary slate? The stales you have seen are nothing compared to the ruling slate. If the rules could be randomly written on the slate, the Divine Land will be in chaos, he said in return. While the 1000 Commandments slate in the 6 Burden Divine City was very powerful, it could only resist ordinary top-ranked true gods at most. The rules of the 1000 Commandments slate were useless when it came to stronger ones, like the disciples of the holy beings or more powerful top-ranked true gods. On the other hand, the ruling slate was different. Even though the holy beings had reached the topmost level in the world, they were still trapped by the ruling slate. Some of them had once tried to resist the ruling slate, and they were harshly punished. History had recorded other holy beings who had disobeyed the rules of the ruling slate, and they had no choice but to escape from the Divine Land, wander through chaos, and were destined to never return. Therefore, the rules of the ruling slate were definitely absolute, except for some minor loopholes. For instance, Zen as a stowaway did not accept the guidance of the Zhang clan. In fact, he also broke a rule of the ruling slate, but because he possessed golden blood, Mike was able to find a loophole in the ruling slate, and Zen managed to avoid the punishment. After all, no matter how powerful the ruling slate was, it was just a slate. It would only follow the rules, and the rules that had been set would always have some flaws and loopholes. Is there any connection between the ruling slate and the Divine Might coins? Zen asked again. He found it hard to connect the two together, so he was still confused. It's very simple. Both changing the rules on the ruling slate and writing new rules on it require Divine Might coins, Master Evil supplied. Writing with Divine Might coins? Zen asked as he blinked. Master Evil glared and said, first, you have to grind Divine Might coins to take their essence, and then make magical Divine Might ink. Really now? Zen was stunned. Generally speaking, to control the ruling slate was the same as controlling the Divine Land. It was known that the Divine Might ink was the only material that could leave words on the ruling slate. Use the Divine Might coins to make Divine Might ink, then you can write the rules that control the whole Divine Land, Zen said as his eyes flickered in understanding. In that case, every wealthy clan will naturally collect Divine Might coins and establish rules that will benefit their own clan. The battle between Murphy and Mike also involved the changing of rules of the ruling slate. Before Mike's fall, the rules of the ruling slate stated that only one true god could participate in the war between two universes. In order to ensure the defeat of evolutionary universe, Murphy modified the rules on the ruling slate. It was much cheaper to modify a rule than to add one. If one wanted to do so, they only needed to change the word 1 to 3. With the modification of this rule, Murphy thought that it wasn't a difficult thing to occupy the evolutionary universe. However, Zen had led Blade and Estelle out from the fairy palace. It was unknown whether it was Bromley's counterattack method or not, but it also destroyed Murphy's plan. That makes no sense, muttered Zen. He thought about it for a while, then said, if I have enough divine might coins, I'll write a rule on the ruling slate which states that no one in the divine land can attack me. Then, everyone including the holy beings won't be able to do anything to me, right? Master Evil's eyes widened again incredulously. Why don't you directly write, kill everyone in the Hall of Holy Beings? Then this world will be yours, right? He asked. Well, why not, said Zen seriously. Do you think those holy beings are all fools? You are not the only one who had the idea. With so many divine eras that have passed, do you know why no one ever wrote such a rule? Master Evil asked in return. Of course, Zen would never think that those holy beings were fools. Surely, there must be a reason. It needs an astronomical number of divine might coins to write a rule on the ruling slate. Even the wealthy clans could hardly accumulate enough divine might coins to write a rule once, and the rules on it are already divided into many levels. The rule you set is too unimaginable, and the cost of divine might coins is also unimaginable. So, such a rule cannot be written down even with all the divine might coins of the wealthy clans. Am I clear? Said Master Evil. Master Evil shook his head. The numbers of divine might coins that different rules need are also different, he said. Zen nodded at the explanation. Had any holy being written an invincible rule, they would be undefeated in the divine land, and the current divine land would not be what Zen saw now. What Master Evil had said suddenly enlightened Zen. No wonder every clan placed so much importance on the divine might coins. Those coins did have an irreplaceable role in the divine land. At the same time, however, he had a new doubt about them. These divine might coins don't look like ores. Where did they come from? He asked. When he was in the central region, those cubic crystals came from the mines. Meanwhile, the life vitality crystals and life vitality jades were condensed from the vitality between heaven and earth. Was it possible that divine might coins were also dug out from mines? That's why everyone wants to go to the floating islands, Master Evil said with a smile. Chapter 1816, Madam Moon. The large clans on the floating islands got 80% of the resources in the divine land. The countless second-tier and third-tier clans took up 15%. And the vast majority in the divine land, the divine citizens, shared the remaining 5%. If the divine citizens wanted to achieve something great, they needed to enter various divine cities and climb up the pyramid through the proving godly houses. And those with remarkable talents had a chance to enter the floating islands and obtain valuable resources. The most important resources are in the Forbidden Lands, Master Evil emphasized. Divine might coins and all sorts of rare treasures are in them. However, almost all the entrances to the Forbidden Lands are controlled by the large clans on the floating islands. Ordinary citizens, even true gods, have no chance of getting in. I was lucky to enter the Soul Wilderness once, Master Evil reminisced with a shake of his head. And because of this rare opportunity, I obtained rewards that were almost equal to my efforts in several divine eras. Master Evil had just become a mid-rank true god then. He didn't have much strength or influence and he was barely known in the vast sky region, but one day, he joined a group of powerful warriors from large clans and followed them into the Soul Wilderness. He had suffered a lot in that place, but found it all worth it in the end as he obtained spoils that helped him reach the top level of a mid-rank true god. Since then, Master Evil managed to make a name for himself in the northern part of the vast sky region. In fact, with his power and influence, he could have established a third-tier clan. However, given his reclusive and single-minded tendencies, he never did such a thing and instead, set his mind into becoming a top-rank true god. The true gods living on the floating islands practically had endless resources, and still, it was difficult for them to become a top-rank true god. And for the true gods born as divine citizens like Master Evil, every step they took towards the top of pyramid was as difficult as crossing a natural chasm. Master Evil had his chance with the stone mouse, but when things did not go according to plan, he had landed in such a pathetic situation. The Forbidden Lands are more important than I have expected, mumbled Zen, lost in thought. Master Evil chuckled. Although I hadn't been to a floating island in the past, I believe it won't be long before you get the chance to go to a forbidden land. Feeling envious of Zen, Master Evil let out a deep sigh. He was here as well, but was left with only his remnant soul. One night passed. Early the next morning, a woman dressed in plain clothes came to escort Zen to the dream pavilion of the Purple Soul Hall. On their way to the Dream Pavilion, Zen encountered many other women who all stopped and gave him curious looks. He thought it was Joy who sent for him, but he was way wrong. A group of proving godly warriors was waiting in the Dream Pavilion. All of them were women. From the looks of it, this group of proving godly warriors had only joined the Purple Soul Hall not long ago. They restrained themselves from looking Zen up and down, but all of them had a surprised look in their eyes. In their heads, they wondered why a man would suddenly come in. The woman who brought Zen into the Dream Pavilion addressed the crowd in a serious voice. Madam Moon will come and talk to you later. You know her temper, so please be quiet. The chattering died at the mention of Madam Moon's name. Zen raised an eyebrow. It looked like Madam Moon had quite the reputation. Not long after the woman in plain clothes left, a fat old lady slowly stepped in from the back door of the Dream Pavilion. She looked odd with the body of an old wrinkly woman and a face as tender as a baby's. This must be Madam Moon, Zen thought. The room's atmosphere turned intense in seconds and the women warriors had all halted and tensed. Fear was evident in their faces. Zen's eyebrows furrowed together. What had Madam Moon done that made these women so afraid of her? Both May and Madam Moon were top-ranked true gods, but May obviously had a much better hold of her temper. Zen vaguely remembered her saying that every one of the Purple Soul Hall was equal except for Joy. Madam Moon stopped in front of the crowd, her eyes sweeping over them once before landing on Zen. She narrowed her beady little eyes. I heard you were chosen by Master Joy. Why can't I feel any purple power body aura from you? This was only the second day since Zen was brought into the Purple Soul Hall by May. He guessed that Madam Moon probably had something to tell him but settled for asking him questions first. You were right, Madam. I don't have the purple power body, said Zen. Madam Moon frowned. You don't have the purple power body? So then why did Master allow you to join the Purple Soul Hall? Because I can also cultivate the purple or a godly way, Zen explained in a calm voice. Show me, Madam Moon ordered impatiently. Zen frowned, irritation slowly rising. This old woman had one terrible temper and what looked like zero patience. However, Zen was new to this place and was still unfamiliar with it, so he just took a deep breath and held on to his patience. Stretching his hand out, Zen flipped his palm and formed a purple aura. The purple internal momentum circled around once before dissipating. Surprised, Madam Moon nodded her head. Well, I don't know how you did it. But since you've been allowed to join the Purple Soul Hall, you're one of us now. She then produced a jade token from her sleeve and tossed it to Zen. Take it. Zen extended his arms and caught the token in his cupped hands. The character of the clan name, Han, was carved on the top of the token and the name, Thad Luo, was carved on the bottom. The token emitted a faint and complex aura, and Zen guessed that it was made by some kind of secret technique. This is the token of the Han clan. You can do nothing without it on the floating island, so don't lose it. Thank you, Madam, Zen replied meekly. You've just entered the floating island, so I have to explain some rules to you. Madam Moon then relayed some basic rules of the floating island in detail. She spoke in a wordy way, repeating each sentence several times. Zen grew impatient every passing minute but willed himself to listen and school his facial expressions. When Madam Moon finally finished, she turned to the group of women warriors in the corner. It was then that Zen realized how kind Madam Moon was acting with him. Those who rank in the bottom 300 this month, stand out now. Madam Moon ordered in a thundering voice. 3 of the women warriors felt chills up their spine and began to tremble when they heard her words. I said now, Madam Moon roared. The 3 women dragged themselves out of the crowd with shaking legs as the rest looked at them with pity. Madam Moon then waved her hand and a purple aura condensed in front of her. Zen couldn't stop his eyebrows from rising at the sight of her purple power. Madam Moon truly was a legend in the purple or a godly way, and her internal momentum was no doubt pure and powerful. As the purple power gradually condensed, it slowly morphed into a thorny purple vine. Please have mercy on us, Madam Moon. We will strive to perform better next month. Please. The 3 girls sobbed as they begged for mercy. Madam Moon didn't budge at all. She waved her hands and the purple vine shot out, filling the room with sharp crisp sounds reminiscent of a hailstorm. Crack, 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 crack. In the blink of an eye, Madam Moon had cracked the vine whip hundreds of times. The girls' clothes were ripped to shreds and their bodies were covered in thick red blood. Save for their faces, every inch of their flesh was mangled and torn to pieces. Chapter 1817, Jade Wall of Legends. Zen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows at the sight of 3 beautiful women being beaten so miserably in front of him. The atmosphere in the Purple Soul Hall was, according to May, supposed to be relaxed, but it seemed there was a cruel side to it as well. Madam Moon mentioned something about ranking in the bottom 300. It seemed to be a mission from the Purple Soul Hall that these 3 women failed to complete, hence, their punishment. After the accorded lashes, Madam Moon then patted her hands gently. It was then that a woman from the Dream Pavilion came in with a porcelain plate containing 3 blood-red pills. Madam Moon snorted at the 3 women. Take these blood-flesh restoring pills. These pills were certainly not common. Even if they were quite far away, Zen could still smell the medicine's strong fragrance. There was no doubt that these pills were refined by a very powerful pill refiner. However, despite being presented medication, the 3 women turned even paler at the sight of the pills. What's going on? Zen asked in his mind. She is really cunning. The blood-flesh restoring pill is terrific for restoring flesh, curing wounds, and improving the overall physical strength of the body. However, it is extremely painful to swallow, Master Evil explained with a laugh. It was a cruel method he had also used to punish disobedient subordinates. He often gave them such kind of medicine as a reward. The 3 women looked miserable, but their wounds were only physical. World lords like them would not take long to regenerate and recover from such injury. There was no need for a blood-flesh restoring pill. It seemed that these pills were part of Madam Moon's punishment. None of the women were willing to take the medicine, but, because of the pressure from Madam Moon, they had no choice but to swallow the pills. Immediately after swallowing, the 3 began to tremble violently. A large spray of blood burst from the wound and their faces all contorted in extreme pain. Blood on their skin began to condense and gradually formed scabs. A blood cocoon soon wrapped around them, and not once did their screams cease. By the time they emerged from their cocoons, their wounds would all be healed. These female disciples were young and hadn't trained that hard before coming to the floating island. Such cruel punishment most likely made a deep impression on them. Zen watched all of this in an indifferent manner. He did not approve of Madam Moon's temper, but he understood the cruelty of this world after all his trials. The competition on the floating island would no doubt be fierce, and if he wanted to get the recognition from the Han clan to get better resources and become stronger, then he would need to give it his all. Madam Moon once again turned to Zen. Dad, do you know why they were punished? Zen shook his head. I don't know. According to the rules of the floating island, everyone who enters, whether the stronger ones at the consummation of true God realm or the weaker ones such as the proving godly warriors, must have at least 3 matches with other warriors at the Jade Wall of Legends every month. Anyone who ranks in the bottom 300 must receive the accorded punishment. Matches in the Jade Wall of Legends. What's that? He asked, not having heard of such thing before. You'll know it soon enough. Everyone, come with me. After she finished speaking, Madam Moon walked straight past the gate of the Dream Pavilion with all the other female disciples in tow. Everyone cast a glance of evident fear at the 3 blood cocoons as they passed. Zen pursed his lips and followed too. Madam Moon soon led them through the huge Purple Soul Hall. Perhaps Madam Moon was the only one here who had such a bad temper. Along the way, everyone who saw her, whether they were proving godly warriors, low-rank true gods, or even mid-rank true gods, all stepped aside to give way to Madam Moon. Master Evil, have you ever heard of Jade Wall of Legends? Zen asked. I have, but I'm not very familiar with it. I think it determines the rankings of the floating islands, but I can't be too sure. I'm not really that knowledgeable about the details, Master Evil replied. Something that determines the rankings of the floating islands? Zen's gaze narrowed slightly. That can't be right. If the Jade Wall of Legends determines the rankings, then how can they allow us to participate? Aren't the rankings very important to the floating islands? It must be a game between holy beings. How can proving godly warriors ever be qualified to participate in it? I don't know. Let's wait and see, Master Evil said. Before long, Madam Moon led them into the nameless hall. Upon entering, Zen immediately caught sight of a tall jade wall in the middle of the hall. This jade wall was dark green and stood about 2,000 feet high and 1,000 feet wide. There was no need for Madam Moon to explain this time. Zen could immediately tell that this was the so-called Jade Wall of Legends, but what exactly was its use? And how could it decide the rankings of the islands? Madam Moon walked up towards the wall and held up her dry right hand towards it. A mysterious palm print was then formed upon its surface. Buzz. There was a light buzzing noise that came from the wall. A ray of light then slowly rose from the bottom, rising and spreading out until it covered its entirety. This is. Green light reflected off of Zen's eyes, and he watched as names began to be outlined by the light. Names were etched onto the wall in tiny font and were spaced closely. It could be said that millions of names were on the wall, and the higher the name, the bigger and more conspicuous. At the top, the names were very different. Instead of the minuscule font, they were as tall as a person. Moreover, it seemed that they were carved onto the jade by the persons themselves. Shan Fang, Walton Tang, Rochelle Mew, my goodness, they are all first-class warriors in the divine land. Master Evil exclaimed in Zen's head. In addition to those names mentioned, Zen also recognized a few other familiar names at the top, Harold Yu, Augustus Yu, and Halat Jing for instance. Those at the top were at the consummation of true God realm, second only to holy beings and most likely to turn into one later on. Is it possible that the Jade Wall of Legends is only a list of people's strength? Zen asked Master Evil in his mind. Master Evil shook his head. It's not that simple, look at the dense names at the bottom. Some of them seem to be constantly moving. Zen looked and, as Master Evil had said, some names did move downwards while a few moved up. Could it be that the Jade Wall of Legends has the magical ability to rank everyone automatically on the floating islands? That's amazing, Zen remarked with the slightest hint of disbelief. One could perhaps measure a creature's cultivation base, but their strength was something that could only be proven through actual combat. A high cultivation base did not necessarily equate to more power, as Zen had proven time and again. It's impossible, not even the ruling slate can do that, let alone the Jade Wall of Legends, Master Evil agreed. As the two discussed the use of the Jade Wall of Legends, Madame Moon turned around and stared right at the young man. Zen immediately stiffened under her gaze. Master said that the genius especially recommended by the Heavenly Han House does not need to be examined by the Purple Soul Hall. She seems to be very confident in you. I doubt that though, I don't know by what means you've used the purple or a godly way. You still need to prove your strength. If you can't even defeat the weakest opponent, I will tell my master and kick you out of the floating island. The aggressive aura she emanated quickly made Zen feel helpless. She was definitely an old woman who thought too highly of herself. Zen looked around and asked, where am I going to find my opponent? Chapter 1818, The Arena of Legends. Madame Moon hadn't got the slightest idea about Zen's origins. And although she wasn't considered popular in the Purple Soul Hall, she was actually an important figure. While the Purple Soul Hall didn't determine one's importance according to seniority, and all female disciples were like sisters, basic rules still had to be observed. That was why Joy granted Madame Moon such great power, which granted her a status similar to that of the elders in some sects who enforced the laws. In addition, she came to grow subconsciously suspicious of some people, which came with her many experiences. Indeed, Joy had personally allowed Zen to enter the floating island of the Han clan, and that Mei had paid a visit to the Han clan's ancestral land, but Madame Moon thought that she had to help her master check up on Zen. Your opponent? Madame Moon sneered. There are too many, but here in the Jade Wall of Legends, you can choose them at will. But how do I find my opponent? Asked Zen. His eyes drifted to the huge Jade Wall of Legends once again. He truly was confused, but he did have a rough plan of how to do it in his mind. Just put the jade token I gave to you in front of the Jade Wall of Legends, Madame Moon said and pointed towards the distance. After that, Zen followed the direction where Madame Moon had pointed and walked towards the Jade Wall of Legends. Only then did he find that the area below the Jade Wall was not a level ground, but had many small grooves. He pulled out the jade token that Madame Moon had given him and placed it in one of the grooves. At the same time, he activated the jade token. Buzz. The moment the jade token was activated, a ripple disturbed the smooth surface of the jade wall in front of him, and the name, Thad Luo, appeared on it. Zen had assumed the name of Thad Luo to enter the floating island. After the Purple Soul Hall had used that name to register him, it was that same name that appeared on the jade wall as well. In addition to his name, it also recorded the number of the round he had taken part in and his point. In his case, both the numbers were currently 0. Just then, a beam of light came out from the Jade Wall of Legends and enveloped him within it. This beam of light, he muttered. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as if he seemed to have realized something. It wasn't the first time he had seen such kind of light. Back when the evolutionary universe had held a competition for the world of chaos, they had claimed that its purpose was to select talents in the world of chaos, when in reality, they had used the trillions of warriors who had participated to temper the godly geniuses through fights. During that time, he had relied on that same kind of light to engulf him so that he could enter the illusion battlefield. It was highly possible that his father had created the illusion battlefield based on the Jade Wall of Legends in the floating islands. After all, his father dominated the evolutionary universe, and the illusion battlefield he had built was even greater and more complicated. Buzz. At that moment, Zen felt his head was filled with a buzzing, humming noise. The real world that surrounded him began to collapse rapidly, then he quickly sank into an illusionary world. He also realized that he could no longer feel the existence of Master Evil. So it really is like what I have guessed. As Zen stood between the heaven and earth in the illusionary world, he finally understood the use of the Jade Wall of Legends. He then thought that there must be more than one Jade Wall of Legends like the one he had just seen, and that there should be a large number of them in the floating islands above the Time Sea. It was through the Jade Walls of Legends that they could project all of the true gods into the illusionary world, and engage them in fights. Master Evil had just said that the Jade Wall of Legends could determine the rankings of the floating islands, and now Zen understood what he meant. When he had placed his Jade token in front of the Jade Wall of Legends, he saw that he had 0 points. That was because it was the first time that he had entered the Jade Wall. As a member of the Han clan, he was supposed to represent the clan in battles. Every time he would win a battle, he would get a small amount of points. Meanwhile, the proven godly warriors, true gods, and even the consummate true gods on the Han clan floating island, all had to choose their battles to fight to accumulate points. A floating island's rank was determined by the total number of points of all the warriors of that floating island. However, holy beings did not participate in the whole process of determining rankings. Instead, they sent their disciples to fight for them. Warriors who are truly powerful, like Harold and Augustus, must have countless points already. While the proven godly warriors might not get any points, or they could only get a few, the noble clans will still consider them as greatly important. Therefore, the 3 women from the Dream Pavilion would be severely punished if their rankings dropped in the bottom 300. I wonder who is my first opponent in the Jade Wall of Legends. Zen thought as he stood there in silence. His musings were interrupted when a light slowly flashed in front of him. A speck of dust drifted up, and more dust followed. The dust continued to condense and soon turned into a human figure. Then a man in brown embroidered clothes appeared in front of Zen. The man sized him up with mocking eyes and said, "Is it also your first time to enter the Arena of Legends?" According to the rules of the Arena of Legends, the opponent for me should also be a newcomer to this arena. Zen nodded slightly. Apparently, the place that they had entered through the Jade Wall of Legends was called the Arena of Legends. It was the place where warriors fought. In Zen's defense, it wasn't his fault since the old lady didn't make it clear to him, nor did she even tell him the rules. She just let him come in and fight. Perhaps this Madam Moon thought that he was a swindler, so she threw him directly into the Arena of Legends. If he lost, she would probably drive him out of the floating island. When the man saw Zen nod, his lips curved up into a wry smile. "Then you really are unlucky," he said and sighed, as if he was mourning for his opponent. "Why did you say that?" Zen asked in surprise. The man simply laughed. "Because I'll definitely defeat you in your first fight. Remember my name. My name is Herman Tang. You should be greatly honored to fight me," Herman Tang said proudly. Not only was Herman Tang a warrior from the top 10 floating islands, he was also the son of a demi-holy being from the Tang clan. It was known that he had finally embarked on his own path after practicing hard for 17 years. Herman Tang was famous on the floating islands. At the very least, many true gods knew that there was such a genius in the Tang clan. It was also Herman Tang's first time to step into the Arena of Legends. He planned to have a winning streak in the fights between proven godly warriors because his strength had far surpassed those of the martial artists of the same level. In other words, most of the proven godly warriors didn't even deserve to fight with him. However, Zen simply looked at his arrogant face and flatly said, "Oh, can we start now?" "Of course," Herman Tang said with a boisterous laugh. Then, 2 very different fingerprints condensed in both of his hands. On the contrary, Herman Tang never thought that he was the one who was unlucky to encounter Zen when he stepped into the Arena of Legends for the first time. Compared with the complicated skills that Herman Tang was about to use, Zen's method was simple and efficient. He swept his body along the ground and approached Herman Tang at an extremely fast speed. His eyes glowed with a golden light and a strange smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Soul attack, so stupid. Herman Tang felt the soul pressure that burst out from Zen's eyes. For a moment, he felt disdainful. However, that feeling only lasted for a second. When Zen turned his stream of soul pressure into a sharp arrow and immediately rushed into his mind, he realized that the soul pressure was much more powerful than he had imagined. It turned out that he was the stupid one, and not his opponent. Moreover, he was the unlucky one, and not his opponent as well. Many others thought that Herman Tang was the new, shining star of the Tang clan. He himself had also claimed to be an invincible proven godly warrior, but he had never thought that he would fight a freak with such a strong soul in his first battle no less. As the son of a demi-holy being, Daniel Tang was quick to react. He had a much better reaction time than the proven godly warriors from the masses. In fact, the proven godly warriors on the floating islands were more than one level stronger than those from the other places in the divine land, but it was clearly because all the talents of the whole divine land were gathered in the floating islands above the time sea. When Hermann sensed that Zen's soul pressure was too strong, he had thought of a counterattack. He knew that his opponent would immediately launch a deadly attack after he had hurt his soul. Zen had used the same skill to defeat Eric back when he was in the Brilliant Moon restaurant. Then again, Hermann Tang was much stronger than Eric. With gritted teeth, he almost used up all his strength to retreat in an attempt to avoid Zen's deadly attack. Unfortunately, even though he had predicted it beforehand, he still failed to dodge it. Bang! Zen's fist hit Hermann Tang square on his body. He aimed his punch directly at his opponent with no frills, but his punch was far from what Hermann Tang could bear. His speed, strength and soul are far beyond my imagination. Is he really a proven godly warrior? A confused look was written across his face, before his body disintegrated. Chapter 18-19, Efficiency and Speed. On the floating island of the Tang clan, a young man in his early 20s walked out of the Jade Wall of Legends. It was none other than Hermann, the warrior who had just lost to Zen. Outside the Jade Wall of Legends stood a dozen people from the Tang clan, and among them was a middle-aged man with gray hair. He had a square face, big eyes, long eyebrows, a long pointed beard, and faint flames on his forehead, which, when all combined together, gave off an intimidating aura. This middle-aged man was Hermann's father, Conrad Tang. He was a demi-holy being. Hermann returned to the floating island of his clan after his cultivation in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. This was the first time that he had stepped into the arena of legends. Conrad had trained his son with great effort, so he was eager to see his son's performance. That was why he had brought his son to the Jade Wall of Legends. Conrad had absolute confidence in his son's strength. The proving godly warriors on the floating islands were not weak. But since Hermann was a new arrival in the arena of legends, he was consecutively paired with other new arrivals. Hence, the opponents he met weren't very strong and he was able to win repeatedly. Conrad estimated that Hermann could get at least 10 consecutive wins in 4 hours, and that he would meet his real opponents only after 20 consecutive wins. However, when Hermann withdrew from the Jade Wall of Legends, green words slowly floated up from the bottom of the wall, indicating that he had lost. Hermann was defeated. Did he let his opponent go on purpose? Did he meet a talent from another big clan? The true gods present looked at one another, unable to make sense of what was happening. Of course, no one was as surprised as Conrad was. Nobody at the same level as Hermann can defeat him in his powerful body. So how could Hermann lose in the very first round? Buzz! The light on the Jade Wall of Legends that enveloped Hermann disappeared. With a gloomy expression, Hermann stood up from the ground. His mind was blank. Hermann, what kind of opponent did you encounter? Why were you defeated in the first round? Conrad asked worriedly. Although Conrad was a demi-holy being, he didn't have many sons. Hermann was the most talented son he had in recent decades. Therefore, he cared about him very much. The true gods around them all curiously turned their attention to Hermann, wanting to know what had happened. This was a result that none of them could have predicted. Hermann pouted and said helplessly, "Father, it was my bad luck. I ran into a monster in my very first round." A monster? Conrad and the others were stunned to hear this. Do you mean he was very powerful? How did he manage to withstand your great strength? Conrad asked in disbelief. If his son described someone as a monster, he or she must be truly powerful. With a resentful look on his face, Hermann explained, "He was so quick that he made a move before I could even activate my body. Also, his soul is incredibly strong. In fact, it seems to be even stronger than those of ordinary low-rank true gods." At this, the entire place broke out into murmurs of disbelief. What? How can the strength of a proving godly warrior's soul be comparable to that of a true god's? Which clan is he from? Is he really that talented? The truth was, most of the people present were cynical about what Hermann had just said, but since he was Conrad's son, they didn't dare to contradict him or express their doubts. There were not many excellent proving godly warriors on the floating islands. Almost every clan had a few talented warriors, but they could cultivate the gold fighting soul at most. No one, not even Conrad, had ever seen a young man from any clan who could cultivate the true god soul. A strong soul alone is not enough to defeat you, Conrad finally said, shaking his head. It's not just that he has a strong soul. His strength and speed are far beyond those of proving godly warriors. He defeated me with just one move. He didn't use any martial art or godly way. I suspect that he must have cheated. I dare say he's a true god. Hermann answered back. The true gods present remained silent. They knew that this was simply impossible and almost felt embarrassed on Herman's behalf that he was trying to justify his defeat with such a far-fetched explanation. On the other hand, Conrad, looking at the anxious expression on Herman's face, said reassuringly with a faint smile, "I guess you met a talent from a big clan, due to your bad luck. But don't be discouraged. Since ancient times, no one has been able to win every match in the arena of legends. Draw lessons from this defeat and be prepared for the next fight." "I see," Herman said with a nod, feeling a little better after hearing that he was not alone in his defeat. Anyway, taking the first blow in the arena of legends was not necessarily a bad thing for him, it let him know his own strength. "What is the name of the opponent you faced? Which clan does he belong to?" Conrad asked. "His name is Thad Luo. He is from the Han clan." The Jade Wall of Legends didn't display any information about Herman's opponent to the audience. However, before entering the arena, Herman could see his opponent's name and clan. "His surname is Luo. You say he is from the Han clan, but he has a different surname," Conrad murmured. "It's the first time that he has stepped into the arena of legends. It seems that he didn't grow up on the floating island." Although Herman hadn't given him much information, Conrad had made a fairly accurate judgment. But he didn't dwell much on Thad. New talents appeared in the Time Sea every day, but most of them were merely passers-by on the stage of history. A mere proving godly warrior was not enough to hold Conrad's attention. On the floating island where the Han clan lived, Zen also left the Jade Wall of Legends. After the light enveloping him dissipated, he leapt up with a relaxed expression on his face. The wall behind him already showed his victory, and there was a 1 marked after his name. When Madame Moon saw this, a look of surprise appeared on her face, which now looked mismatched with her bloated body. She was not surprised that Zen had defeated his opponent, but rather that it had taken him such a short time to do it. "Fortunately, I didn't fail you. I won the first round," Zen said with a smile, cupping his hands. Madame Moon shook her head. "You were just lucky. You faced an opponent that also stepped into the arena of legends for the first time. He was too weak to be your opponent, so it doesn't count." Zen shrugged his shoulders in agreement. He was indeed too weak. If Conrad and Herman had heard this conversation, they would have been furious. In fact, Madame Moon herself would have eaten her words and been a lot more appreciative of Zen's abilities if she had known that his opponent was actually the son of a demi-holy being. But Zen genuinely felt that Herman's strength was very ordinary. "Go and fight again. You must win 5 consecutive rounds to prove your strength," Madame Moon said coldly. Hearing what she had said, the female disciples present exchanged glances with one another. They were all worried about Zen. The opponents that one would encounter in the arena of legends could be either strong or weak. Even though Zen had been lucky enough to encounter a weak opponent in his first round, he might not be so lucky in the next round. Perhaps he would have to face a talent from a big clan. In that case, he would definitely lose. Madame Moon was actually trying to embarrass Zen by asking him to win 5 consecutive rounds. The female disciples felt indignant on Zen's behalf, but no one dared to speak up for him. However, Zen did not hesitate even a little. The battle he had just won was not even a warm-up for him. After he turned around, he activated the Jade token again and entered the Jade Wall of Legends for the second time. In the illusory space, his second opponent appeared. This time, his opponent was a rough-looking man with a fierce expression on his face. As soon as he appeared in the arena, he opened his mouth with the intention of saying something malicious to threaten Zen and shake his morale. However, the words he had prepared in his head didn't even leave his throat before he found himself crushed under Zen's foot. "You're much weaker than my first opponent. The disciples of the wealthy clans are far inferior to what I have imagined," said Zen, shaking his head. You, the man under his foot kept struggling. Zen looked down at the man and smiled. "By the way, aura doesn't come from your mouth. It's a reflection of your strength." With these words, Zen pressed his foot down harder on the man, and soon, he heard the crack of bones breaking. The second battle was over. Zen's first battle in the arena of legends had lasted only for about a minute, including the time Herman had sprouted nonsense. Now, his second battle had lasted less than that, a mere 27 seconds. Madame Moon saw Zen activate his Jade token and enter the arena of legends under the glow of light. But before she could even come back to her senses, Zen had already finished the battle. The Jade Wall of Legends showed that he had once again won. Chapter 18:20, Points. It did not take much time for Zen to conclude the fight and emerge victorious. Watching this feat, all the female disciples in the nameless hall were amazed. It was beyond them to understand how Zen had won both the battles with such ease. Were his opponents really too weak to hold on even for merely a few minutes while fighting with Zen? Is it possible for Thad to be more powerful than Shauna? No, of course not. He cannot be compared to her. Shauna has mastered a godly way. Moreover, her points at that time were high, and the opponents she encountered were much more powerful. They are in completely different league zones. Thad has just entered the Jade Wall of Legends, and the opponents he encounters won't be that powerful. The entire time, the female disciples were discussing among themselves in hushed tones. Shauna, about whom they were discussing, was once considered the best cultivator among the proving godly warriors in the Purple Soul Hall. Not long after entering the Purple Soul Hall, she had shown her extraordinary talent. She easily won every battle after she entered the arena of legends. Recently, through her achievements, she had become a true god. Despite all these accomplishments, they could not help but compare Shauna with the newcomer, who was showing some remarkable skills. Madame Moon was not expecting this at all. With her typical skeptical attitude towards anything, she actually thought that there was something wrong with the Jade Wall of Legends. She was not ready to accept the fact that Zen completed 2 battles so quickly, with one lacing for a minute and the other less than 30 seconds. The opponents that Zen encountered could not be really that weak. After all, this was the floating island, and his opponents weren't those ordinary divine citizens outside of the time sea. It only meant that Thad's strength was far too powerful, and the difference in strength was enough to pulverize his opponents to mere pulp. Madame Moon had in fact accepted Zen's strength, but she didn't say it out loud. She continued to frown as she said, "Go and fight again." Zen said nothing, as he turned to activate the Jade token again. As Zen was enveloped by a gentle light, Madame Moon began to count the time in her mind. She still wanted to see if Zen was really that outstanding. Would it take only seconds for him to take every opponent down? 1, 2, 3. In fact, Madame Moon was not the only one who was counting the time. The female disciples were also curious about how long it would take for Zen to finish this battle. By the time they reached the 18th second, the figures on the Jade Wall of Legends changed. The gentle light that enveloped Zen disappeared, and he retreated from the arena of legends. 18 seconds. He has yet again won another battle and accumulated 12 points in total. His points surpassed even mine. In the arena of legends, the points were obtained from their opponents. Technically speaking, the more the battles a warrior won, the higher the points they would receive, thereby receiving a higher ranking. The 3 female disciples who had been punished by Madame Moon all had negative points, so they were ranked in the last 300 in the floating islands. To be specific, they were ranked within the last 300 among the proving godly warriors. In the arena of legends, the battles were divided into 5 levels. The first level were battles between proving godly warriors, the second level between low-rank true gods, the third level between mid-rank true gods, and the fourth level between top-rank true gods. The last level was between the martial kings. The warriors that fought in the battles of martial kings were the powerful ones like Harold, Augustus, etc. In fact, as Zen had successively won the battles in the level of proving godly warriors, the opponents that Zen would be facing would get even stronger. However, in the level of battles between proving godly warriors, Zen's first opponent was Herman, who was qualified to be ranked top among the proving godly warriors. Zen's strength had long surpassed the strength of Herman or all the other proving godly warriors. All it remained to see was that if the warriors who had the highest points among the proving godly warriors were able to defeat him. However, Zen did not collect sufficient points right now, so it was not possible to meet those people. After Zen had fought 3 battles, Madame Moon's perception towards Zen completely changed. Madame Moon was extremely strict, and was loathed by many proving godly warriors and true gods. However, she was extremely loyal and devoted, and all she did was for the sake of her master Joy. Now that she realized Zen's true value, she would definitely refrain from speaking ill about him. This time, however, before Madame Moon could speak, Zen activated his Jade token again. And the time that he used to end the 4th round was much shorter. From the time he entered the arena to the time he came out, it merely took 6 seconds. This was an impossible feat. In such a short period of time, there was hardly any time to act. Even then, Zen managed to win 1 more match and gain 8 more points, totaling to 20 points. As the light faded away, Zen looked at the baffled expressions of the crowd and gave an embarrassed smile. He explained, "I met the first opponent again." He actually admitted defeat without fight. It turned out that Zen met Herman, his first opponent, in the arena of legends. After Herman was defeated by Zen in the first round, he had 2 consecutive wins. With his strength, he was quickly able to accumulate points by defeating ordinary proving godly warriors. He didn't expect that he would encounter Zen again after 2 consecutive wins. He could only attribute this to his bad luck. Herman was a wise man. Although he was very confident about his own strength, he was well aware about Thad's strength. He knew that he would not have a chance to win, so he might as well admit defeat directly. Therefore, in the eyes of Madame Moon and the others, Zen had made a record that shocked everyone. As per the promise made to Madame Moon, Zen completed all 5 battles. She did not ask Zen to continue. Instead, she asked him to put away his jade token. At the same time, she said to the female disciples present, "You can enter the arena of legends on your own." Hearing the order of Madame Moon, those female disciples took out their jade tokens and stepped forward to put them into the grooves beneath the jade wall of legends. This jade wall of legends was as wide as 1,000 feet and could allow 300 to 400 people to enter into the arena of legends at the same time. Moreover, on the floating islands, there were numerous such kinds of jade walls. "The master has sent May to personally bring you here. She definitely has an eye for exceptional individuals. Thad, you were outstanding today," Madame Moon said with a faint smile. Hearing her words, Zen muttered to himself, "Just a while ago you doubted your master's judgment and were going to drive me out of this island. And now you completely contradict yourself. This hall is for all the disciples to cultivate. If you face any challenges in your cultivation, feel free to ask anyone in the Purple Soul Hall. If you have time, I suggest you come here more often and earn more points in the arena of legends," Madame Moon said. "What are the benefits of earning points?" Zen asked. Honestly speaking, Zen wasn't interested in coming into the arena of legends every day to challenge those proving godly warriors. At this stage, all Zen was interested in was to break through his bottleneck and condense his godly tile. Zen did not want to enter the arena of legends just to earn points in order to help the Han clan to improve the ranking of their floating island. Benefits of earning points. A strange smile appeared on the face of Madame Moon. She then said in a stern tone, "Don't you know that the statuses of all of the floating islands on the Time Sea and all of the clans are decided by the Jade Wall of Legends?" As Master Evil had said, the only reason they wanted to enter the floating islands was that all the entrances to the forbidden areas were controlled by the noble clans of the floating islands. It was extremely difficult for true gods who were from the grassroots level to enter the forbidden areas. They probably wouldn't get a chance even in their whole lifetime. The warriors and true gods in the floating islands had to fight to get a chance to enter the forbidden areas. The number of points they got was one of the conditions that could help them gain the qualification to enter those forbidden areas, and the requirement for the number of points varied in different forbidden places. The points could not only help warriors obtain the qualifications to enter the forbidden areas, but the Han clan would also offer very attractive rewards and even privileges according to the rankings of the warriors' points. It could be said that the points in the arena of legends were only second to the divine might coins for the warriors on the floating islands. Sometimes, they were even more important than the divine might coins. Madame Moon patiently explained all the details to Zen. Understood. Zen nodded. It had to be appreciated that the powerful clans on the floating islands did find an effective method to motivate everyone to work hard after countless divine eras exploration. The arena of legends did not involve the holy beings. But if the strength of true gods in a floating island weakened, the ranking of the floating island would also decline, which forced those holy beings to do their best to train the warriors on the floating island as well as their own disciples. Zen would definitely earn the points in the arena of legends, but before that, he wanted to see the reward the Han clan had to offer to the warriors.